Ahoy, everyone. Sniper PFL like a second ago. Where's the freaking stream already, boys? And he's was off by just a few seconds because I was like 15 seconds before going actually live. So I'm here. What people are saying I'm late. I'm not late. I'm like literally right on time. Everyone, and if I need to, I can always go. I can always like switch over to some sort of other internet device to have a better like Wi-Fi connection. But I think this should be good. So we have the leaders debate coming up in about 15 minutes here. So what I have going on is just the CPAC stream on the side, and I'll jump to that once we're actually going to the leaders debate. Yeah, people are saying stuttering video, so let me know if that holds up. It looks like things have sped up again. So if it's not, so if it lags a little bit later, I can always switch over to a device that will allow me to make it go a little bit smoother. If I just basically use a hotspot, because my phone, oddly enough, gets better internet than in any hotel for some reason. It's not the hotel's fault. It's just the fact that for some reason they always have like one Wi-Fi device on one of the floors, and you're definitely not on that floor. But yeah, so it looks like it's fantastic now. But so okay, resetting. I'm going to be doing this in a style where when we do the debate, I'm not just going to like let it play and then just sit there like eating Cheetos or something like that. I'm probably going to be stopping it as we go. Like every time a significant statement is made, we'll jump over and listen to, or we'll talk a bit about it. I'm not going to make it so that like once I'm done the debate, it's like 3 hours after the actual debate ended. I'll like pause it for like 20 seconds to talk a little bit, maybe bring up a question, and that's it. Digest the debate as we're going rather than just playing it. I'm just sitting there looking stupid. Since you probably don't want to watch the debate and then hear me break down each moment of it for 2 hours afterwards, we can just sort of stick to the debate, pause it when it seems reasonable, and then keep moving on. Well, thank you for everyone joining. Have a good amount of people, and hey, we have competition tonight, as people are pointing out. The Pleb Reporter is streaming. I think the Juno News is streaming. Rebel News will be streaming. Clyde Do Something is streaming. Probably literally every single YouTuber and their grandmother is streaming for this because it's the English debate, and this only happens in theory every 4 years, unless it happens a little bit sooner like this year. But yeah, someone has a question. Vicky Vane says, Wyatt, can you explain how the Conservatives now have the more efficient vote this election? The problem is always about Quebec. In previous elections, the Liberals have heavily relied on the GTA. In this election, it looks like they may be trying to rely more on Quebec now, and so they greatly need to grow their Quebec vote. And so more and more of their vote is going into Quebec, but if it's not actually going up enough, they're gaining 5 or 6% in the province, but it's not really unlocking many more ridings. So overall, they may go from, 33% of the vote last time to 40, but that 7% is like half of it is going into the province of Quebec, but that's not enough for them to start winning lots of riding outside of Montreal. And so what we have going on now is that the Conservatives are starting to move into the GTA and working class neighborhoods, and they're the party who their new seats that they've unlocked, they're going to win by 37% or 41%, whereas the Liberals are doubling down so much on Quebec that their vote count is going up, but mostly just in the city of Montreal and nowhere else. That's always the problem that the Conservatives have had out west, is that they keep that. It's not even that they're playing to them. O'Toole betrayed Western voters constantly, but because of just the way that the election was going, he increased the vote in Alberta and in Saskatchewan, so he won by literally dictatorship type numbers in Saskatchewan and Alberta. But that didn't really mean anything. So they won the popular vote, but it's because they were winning ridings with massive margins. Whereas it looks like now the Liberals are actually doing better in Alberta. They're doing better in Saskatchewan. They're doing better in Manitoba. They're not really winning anything new, but they're doing better. Same thing in Quebec. They're winning more of the vote in Quebec, but they're not really doing better in terms of seats. But they are losing where the Conservatives could start winning these vote split margins of 39%. Greens at 5. Again, always let me know if the so yeah, someone's saying that the audio is skipping. I might even almost want it to a hotspot even before this debate starts because I think that's the better way of ensuring I'm not constantly hiccuping here. You guys might see it cut out for a second here as I do a switch. Bear with me here, everyone. I'm just moving it over to a hotspot, and then you'll see it break up probably a lot for a second, and then I'll be jumping back on. Oop, almost forgot. My phone has to be on a Wi-Fi. It has to have the Wi-Fi open to go for a hotspot. And we are T-minus 9 minutes away from the debate starting. Okay, there we go. Okay, it's going to cut out for a second here. Okay, perfect. We should have much better stability here in just a second. I guess we have the leaders moving in for the debate right now. I will bring the audio in for CPAC.
This kind of rolls in front of people at home. Just very quickly take a listen. You see there Steve Paikin shaking their hands. He will be moderating the debate. Steve Paikin, a well-known journalist in Ontario, anchor with TV Ontario. Laurie, what do you think?
I actually really like the choice of Steve Paikin here. I think he actually is a pretty fair guy when I've seen him on TVO, even though I've heard he's actually privately quite liberal. Ooh, so good question from Lowellworks 31, who says, you have been in Nepean. What's your take on how the Nepean and Canada ridings look for swinging to Conservatives? Nepean is actually winnable, even though we have Mark Carney as the Liberal candidate riding. Barbara Ball is doing pretty well. Like, I was in a poll where, not too much inside baseball here, but I looked at the charts and we only had 18% of the vote in this one poll area previously in the 2021 election. And this time you'd go down a street and there'd be a bunch of conservatives and there'd be some liberals, and the next street would have a bunch of liberals and some conservatives. Like, I would give it that the liberals were probably going to win that area. At the same time, so like the liberals might be more likely to win that poll area, but the fact that it's tight in those polls means that the polls that were already good for conservatives are going to be fantastic for conservatives. I even heard that the neighborhoods that have a heavier Chinese population are swinging wildly conservative, even though they went very liberal last time, because of the issue of crime being so bad. Yeah, Peter Russell says Steve Paikin has bad TDS, but other than that, he's solid. Yeah, no doubt someone like that would really, really hate Donald Trump. But at the same time, I have appreciated the sorts of people he'll have on his show to interview. In fact, I think some of the famous first interviews of Jordan Peterson was Steve Paikin having him on for small debates. So that's nice. I assume that this is just them doing audio setup and some notes first.
Impose himself on the debate, kind of set the tone a little.
Yeah. So what do you guys think is going to happen in the debate? I think that, and I said this in my video earlier today, the conservative, or Polyev, kind of went back a little bit. He wasn't being super, super forward because he was wanting to basically save himself for this debate. Why telegraph all your best attacks in the French debate when the Conservatives could literally increase their vote share in Quebec by 7% and they would win maybe one extra seat? Quebec is just a weird province where there are sections of the province that goes very conservative, the border with Maine. There is Quebec City, a couple seats go conservative, and then nothing else. For the Conservatives to break into other areas, they'd need massive higher numbers of votes. Like in Montreal, for example, to prove my point, there are ridings like Papineau and Verdun that have conservatives only at 4% or 6% in a given election. So there's no way of winning a Montreal seat except for somewhere like a Mount Royal. So when you increase your vote share, you're not coming anywhere closer to winning a Montreal seat. Yeah, there's some suburban ridings you could maybe win, but we're really splitting hairs. So why, if you're Poilievre, blow all of your best attack lines in the French debate that then Carney's people can prepare for the next debate? So he kind of just stayed there, seemed nice, girded up his incumbent ridings, and then he let Blanchette go after Carney in that debate. For some reason, I would say that Singh really blew it, because although he went after Carney a few times, it just really wasn't that great. He never really hit him over anything. And if you guys are wondering about the audio, they are still doing audio checks for the debate, so I'm just not. I just don't have the audio turned on right now. MinMax123 for $5 says everyone should go to the Mandar's Hindu temple and engage Hindu voters or hold a sign. They should know a vote for the Liberals is a vote for Khalistan. And Poilievre actually had a really good post-debate answer on Khalistan, where he never mentioned it, but he basically says that, sure, we can have a lot of, people can come to Canada and join our country and our economy and our culture, just don't bring your foreign conflicts here. And there's nobody but the Khalistanis that he was talking about there, which is very smart, because Hindu voters after evangelical Christians are the most reliable conservative bloc. Do not let the Khalistanis mess that up, because the best you're going to do by pandering to Khalistanis is win a few more Sikh votes, because the Sikhs don't like Khalistanis either. They're just dweebs to them. They're just obnoxious LARPers pretending that they're fighting for a country, for their own country. And you're like, dude, you're in Surrey, British Columbia. You're in Abbotsford. You're in Brampton. You're not doing anything here. Anyways, but thank you, Leslie91, for the $27.99 super chat. If Pierre doesn't win, does he stay opposition in Parliament? I actually assume that he would actually hold on, because I think the threat, frankly, of somebody like Doug Ford coming in as the leader would make everyone just be like, stick with Poilievre. Even if a bunch of people really don't like Poilievre or they get annoyed that he didn't win after the election, do you want Doug Ford to be the leader? I think that's actually Poilievre's best asset if he doesn't win this election for staying in, is that nobody likes Doug Ford. Arctic Ian says, I hope Pierre will make none of it conservative again. Yeah, fantastic. I love how weird the territories are with their votes. They'll go literally in all three directions. I guarantee the Greens will win a territory one day. Verinder Sidhu, thank you for the $2 super chat, Verinder. This is going to be fun. Let's discuss soon. Absolutely. And so the debate's not live yet. They're just setting up still for the next couple of minutes. I will then turn on the audio for the CPAC, in a second here. And then I will be going through the debate that way, and I will be pausing it at moments when it feels substantial enough to do something like that. I'm not just going to throw out, I'm not just going to do a bunch of pause every 5 seconds, be like, I disagree with that. I'll be like more nuanced with how I pause, like pause after a topic or pause after a really stupid point. Thank you, Monster000, for the $2 super chat. If I was at home and you super chatted me without including a message, I would have done my normal thing of finding a knick-knack in my studio to show people off that they don't know about. But thank you for the support. Cassidy Ireland says the Nixon versus Kennedy debate was first televised debate in the U.S. Radio listeners went Nixon, watchers went Kennedy. Attractiveness and height matters to the point Americans even elected a Catholic. Huge. And yeah, and I think that the good thing is that Poilievre should have the visuals on his side, but he should also have the argumentation, hopefully. John Roberts asks, why do you like Jasmine? I've never really watched her show, and that's not to be like nasty or anything. I just don't watch other people's shows that much. I'll watch like Frank Vaughn, even though me and Frank don't agree on everything. I just find his presentation interesting. I watch Chris at the Great Canadian Bagel a lot. I will watch some True North or Juno News shows. I'll watch a couple Rebel clips here and there. I just don't watch sometimes other people's shows if they do something similar, because naturally we end up covering a couple of the same topics, and then I end up seeming like, you almost get tired of hearing about it. Milo and Odie, the Bashi, For $5, thank you for that. CBC News is just a straight up propaganda arm of the Liberal Party. They are straight up blatant anti-conservative. Defund the CBC. I absolutely agree. And what was super egregious from Katie Simpson the other day was going to the White House press briefing room and saying, Trump hasn't said anything about the 51st state in a while. Can you say he likes the 51st state thing into this microphone? It's like, it was not a news story. Why did you go to the White House and you're just like, can you say the thing about the 51st state again so we can get it back in the headlines? And that's exactly what happened. But I'll bring up the debate here now, because obviously we are going into it.
Are here and ready to go. Mark Carney, Pierre Poilievre, Yves-François Blanchet, and Jagmeet Singh. They will debate the major challenges facing our country, from tariffs to the cost of living, public safety, energy, and... Good evening, everybody. I'm Steve Paikin, your moderator for tonight's debate.
John Roberts says, who else thinks Jasmine is hot? Well, thank you for giving the 279 throw that up in front of people, so I guess everyone can take the poll that John's putting up.
This is the 2025 Federal Leaders Debate.
Oh, and by the way, the audio's not cutting out. I was just
good to be with you
muting
here
it.
tonight in Montreal for what I'm sure will be a memorable evening. Our first theme is tariffs and threats to Canada, and we will begin with a round of questions. You will each have a minute to answer, and then we'll go to open debate, and the first question goes to Mr. Carney. Okay, what is the starting point for negotiations, Mr. Carney, with the United States if, as you have stated, our relationship with the U.S. is over as we know it?
Well, first, Steve, may I thank you and also thank fellow leaders for their service to Canada, people at home for taking the time to watch. I just want to underscore the premise to your question, because I think the relationship that we've had with the United States, relationship over the course of almost the last 4 decades, which has been one of steady and increasing integration, has fundamentally changed, because the president is looking to fundamentally restructure the trading system. So the starting point has to be one of strength. It has to show that we have control of our own economic destiny, has to have a clear plan here at home to build this economy, to diversify our trading partners with like-minded countries, and also has to have a position of strength in terms of our reaction to the U.S. unjustified tariffs. And that's why we have put in place counter tariffs that have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impact here at home.
Mr. Poilievre, would you do anything differently?
Well, first of all, thank you, Steve, and thank you to our fellow contestants here today. It's an honor to be here. What would I do different? Well, I'll start by what I would do the same. I think we do need to counter the American tariffs with our own to deter this economic aggression. We must make clear that we will always be sovereign and independent. What would I be doing differently? Well, we need to be in a position of strength. The Liberal government has weakened our economy with anti-energy laws, red tape, and high taxes that have driven $500 billion out of our country into the United States and made us incapable of shipping our resources overseas. That weakness threatens our ability to stand up for ourselves. So what I do, I would cut taxes, red tape, and approve our resource projects so that we can get our goods to market and bring home the jobs, so we stand up to President Trump from a position of strength.
That was honestly the perfect answer from him on that. He went for it from a position that the Liberals have made us vulnerable and not playing into the game that Carney's actually the real strong one.
The question, Steve. We've seen what for a lot of people feels like a betrayal when we look at the United States. I grew up in a border town. I grew up in Windsor. And we saw how connected we were as a city and as a community. People lived on one side of the border, worked on the other. People traveled back and forth all the time. We're in the automotive capital of Canada, and we knew how important it was to be able to build cars in Canada. But we saw that those cars went back and forth across the border. Seeing what Donald Trump did to attack Canada in this unprovoked way without any justification really felt like a betrayal. And so Canadians now are right to say, well, we don't really trust Donald Trump at this point, and we can't really have a lot of faith in him. So when it comes to our Arctic sovereignty and our security, we need to make decisions that are in our best interest and no longer be so dependent and so reliant on the U.S. And that's what I would advocate for, making sure we are resilient, independent, and less dependent on the United States.
Monsieur
So far, he has a complete 5 out of 10 response. I would give Carney's response a 7 out of 10. I think that Pauly was a 9 out of 10.
First, be all welcome in Quebec and Montreal. You have me because I try not to speak English in Montreal. However, I think we should never underestimate the threat that Mr. Trump poses on Quebec economy and Canada economy and Mexico economy. But we must acknowledge the fact that the economy of Quebec is built differently. The challenges are not the same. The necessity for Quebec to have at least partly its own voice in the negotiation is important. The difference between Quebec and Canada is very important in terms of economy, but also in terms of identity and language and values and who we are and the way we want to handle immigration. So we have the right to be different, and if this difference is being respected by whoever becomes Prime Minister of Canada, we will be reliable partners in order to achieve the best possible negotiation and protect ourselves and our economies as partners.
Merci, Monsieur Blanchet. Okay, we now move into open debate.
Before they get into that, this is where I'm going to be pausing stuff. So I think that Poilievre, and I'm not just biased towards conservatives, easily had the best response there on Trump. He didn't just do the, well, we got to gird ourselves up and we got to stand up strong, because Carney's response was fine. It's just fine. It's what you would expect from him. I think Poilievre did a good things. These guys were the ones who opened the door for this becoming a threat. Now, I don't really like everyone doing the kind of anti-American, we got to use retaliatory tariffs against them. Okay, retaliatory tariffs are stupid because you're just punishing your own people. At the same time, I understand why Poilievre has to do that, and I think he ended up saying something different that gets people's attention. Carney said what you'd expect. Singh was barely there, and Blanchet shouldn't be here because he doesn't actually care about the rest of the country other than Quebec, and so his answer was extremely typical. Actually, maybe during these pauses, I'll do like a super chat just to catch up on them as I go. Epic Encore says, Canadian Brazilian, I fled socialism, but now see Canadian repeating Brazil's mistakes, rising crime, corruption, and economic decline. Time for change. Well, and absolutely, tons of people who come from like Poland and come from Eastern Europe or former socialist South American countries say like it's literally the same thing in Canada. It starts off small, starts off the government just saying, oh, we just need this from you. We just need you to comply with this new economic program we have. We just have this new language law. We just need to give up guns, and it never ends there. It just keeps getting worse. And thank you, Norm Strum, for the $10 super chat there. But I will jump back to not live, but we'll go back
and
to
I'll start about Mr. Carney with you, and then we go from there. Do you still support dollar for dollar tariffs, even if they ultimately threaten Canadian jobs and businesses?
No, and in fact, we've already moved off from dollar for dollar tariffs. We have to recognize, and I think we all do, the United States economy is more than 10 times the size of the Canadian economy. And the principle in terms of our counter tariffs is to have maximum impact in the United States, as I said a moment ago, minimum impact here. So we have to think about the impact on Canadian businesses. I'll give you one example, if I may. In the auto sector, the way we've designed those auto tariffs is that Canadian automakers, if they maintain production here, if they maintain their investments here, when I say Canadian automakers, I mean automakers that have jobs and plants and production in Canada, then they can have lower tariffs on what they ship to the United States. We create a huge incentive for them in order to do that. We also have carved out the Canadian auto parts sector. Last point, I know you're pressed for time. The Canadian auto parts sector, so that it can remain competitive with the United States. We're focused on maximizing Canadian jobs, maximizing the harm in the U.S., so that we get them where we need them.
Mr. Poilievre, you want in, then Mr. Singh.
Well, Mr. Carney, you claim that you want our country to respond with strength, but after the last decade, half of which time you've been Justin Trudeau's economic advisor, our economy is weaker than ever before. It's been the worst growth in the G7. We've lost $500 billion of investment south of the border. You supported blocking pipelines in Canada that gave Donald Trump and the US a near monopoly over our energy. And now you want to keep in place Bill C-69, the liberal no new development law that blocks us from shipping our resources overseas. How could you possibly think it's a good idea to give the Americans a continued monopoly on our energy projects when you have seen how much these liberal policies have weakened our country over the last decade?
That was just a bunch of haymakers in a row.
Yeah.
Yes. So let's go to my record. My record is a month long as prime minister. And this goes to the heart of coming to the Americans with strength, but doing the right thing for Canada. Within the first week as prime minister, I sat down with all the premiers of the provinces and territories, as well as the leaders of the Indigenous peoples. Got an agreement with all the provinces and territories, doesn't happen very often, got an agreement for them to have one Canadian economy instead of 13, first point. Secondly, to commit the federal government to do its part by Canada Day. So free trade in Canada by Canada Day. Thirdly, the federal government to commit with respect to project reviews.
The question was about
Sorry,
pipelines.
I'm getting to it.
There you go.
Thirdly, one project, one review, and relying
That's
on
possible
provincial.
under
Yes, it is
C69.
possible under. It is possible on our system.
No,
It is
One
the
would already
impact
under
assessment.
C69.
It is agreed on under the impact assessment framework, and we have a cooperation agreement with British Columbia already. We're looking forward to them with the other provinces. We will move forward.
Gotta let-
jump in on
okay,
this.
Mr. Singh's turn, please.
Of course, we agree around having a strategic response to the United States. But what I'm concerned about is what we're doing here in Canada.
That was good.
We are already seeing threats to our country in that just the threats alone of the tariffs have meant Canadians have lost their jobs. The threats of the tariffs that are in place right now, the impact of those tariffs is that we've lost jobs in steel, aluminum, and the auto sector. People are already losing their jobs. And while Mr. Carney, you had time, as you mentioned, not very long time, but as Prime Minister, you showed us your priorities. The first thing you did is you had traveled, you made a tax cut for millionaires, which was reversing on the capital gains. So you gave a tax cut to millionaires, but you didn't have time to increase the amount that workers get on EI. Right now, workers who are struggling and wondering, what am I going to do if I lose my job? Workers who've lost their job are saying, how do I pay my bills when EI only covers half of a worker's salary? Maybe 40 years ago that would have worked, but right now most workers are spending their entire salary just to pay the bills, to pay their mortgage and their rent, and to put food on the table. So EI is not good enough, and it shows Canadians that you didn't make it a priority to protect those that are impacted by these tariffs, that are threatened because their jobs are lost.
We have
Honestly, a good attack from Jagmeet Singh from the perspective if you are a more lefty Canadian.
Leaders saying one thing in French and another one in English. You said in British Columbia in February that you would force oil and gas through pipelines through Quebec, either we wanted it or not. You would use emergency powers in order to do so. And 2 days later in Montreal, you said that you would never do that without the approval of Quebec. What's the point of using emergency powers if you do have the agreement of Quebec? However, I do agree with you. It's important to be very strong in front of Mr. Trump. However, I would keep the dollar for dollar policy. Don't be weak in front of Mr. Trump. And those counter tariffs have to be targeted. You have put out already $2 billion for Ontario auto industry, car industry, and the lumberwood industry in Quebec has already paid to United States $2 billion, and you have not raised one finger in order to help us.
Let's get from Mr. Poliev and then
Them
a response from Mr.
reenacting
Carney.
stabbing Caesar to
Mr.
death.
Carney refused to answer the question about pipelines. Just the other day, he said that he doesn't necessarily think we need to build pipelines. Let me tell you what that means. Right now, the Americans get 97% of our oil, 100% of our natural gas exports at big discounts. We have to send Canadian oil from Western Canada through the States just to get it back to Quebec because we don't have a pipeline. And now there's this law, Liberal Law C-69, which effectively bans pipelines. The 14 biggest energy and resource companies say it has to go if we're ever going to build another project. And I asked Mr. Carney why he would keep in place this anti-pipeline law that effectively empowers Donald Trump to have a total monopoly on our single biggest export. Why would you not repeal this liberal law? Isn't it because you are exactly the same in the same
Mark
line
Carney
as
is such
Justin
a big
Trudeau
sourpuss
and the
right now.
rest
Look at
of the
him.
liberal team that is now making up your cabinet?
Let's get a response.
Guys, look at this man. Look how upset he already is. That is screenshot worthy. The man looks like he is having an absolutely miserable time because he is. The man is being treated like somebody just said a bit ago. Thank you for the line. He is being treated like a human pinata.
Response.
Well, let me pick up a couple of points that have been made. The first thing I did as prime minister was to cut the carbon tax. That's the first thing. Second thing is made a
What a
commitment.
great idea.
Made a commitment that all proceeds from our tariffs will go to workers and those
Question was
companies
about
most
pipelines.
affected.
Ow.
There were several points
Means
raised. and
nothing so far.
If I may, Mr. Steve, if I may address, I'm trying to do it
He's
quickly.
actually
because
falling
several points
apart.
raised. All proceeds go to workers and the firms most effective, and those proceeds are considerable. Third thing, I'm interested in solutions. I'm interested in getting energy infrastructure built. That means pipelines, that means carbon capture storage, that means electricity grids. And here's how you do it. And we've already moved in the first month. Cooperation agreements with the provinces. Guess what? We are a federation. You need to cooperate with Quebec. You need to cooperate with the provinces. You need to get First Nations and Indigenous people buy-in. You can do that through the one project, one review window that we put in place at that first ministers meeting, as well as, if necessary, using emergency powers to fulfill the federal responsibility, but not the unique.
Mr.
These
Poilievre, you
are
want to come
vague
back on that?
agreements that don't mean
What you're
anything.
saying, Mr. Carney, with respect, is a total contradiction. The No New Development Law, C-69, guarantees there will not be one-stop shop because it requires the Government of Canada to actually duplicate
So
the
what
same,
Mr. Poilievre is saying is that have no rules,
project.
have no regulation,
have one-stop shop.
controls
Mr. Singh,
over,
let's-
over
Well,
the
but
energy.
Mr. Singh,
Sorry,
we
but
just
because
got
let
caught.
him finish his pollute.
Let's just let him finish his sentence.
That is not true. In fact, Mr. Singh, the reality is we should have strong rules enforced once. We shouldn't have multiple
It's the first
levels
time
of
I heard you care about
referrals
the environment.
that it takes now 17 years to
that your
get a
position?
major project approved in this country. That is why in the last 10 years we've had the worst economic growth in the entire
Liberals bought a
G7.
pipeline and
We
built a
cannot
pipeline.
afford
Dude,
a
Jake,
fourth
we will throw you out a
liberal
window
term.
if you don't
We
stop
need a
talking.
change, and the Conservative plan for a change will include repealing the anti-pipeline law so we can get our energy to markets other than the United
Mr.
States.
Singh, then Mr.
Well,
Carney.
while these two compete about who's more pro-pipeline, I think what we need to do is, I mean, it's clear the Liberals bought a pipeline, they built a pipeline. I don't know what Pierre is complaining about. That's what they did. I think what we need to do, if we're talking about energy in our country, we need to build an east-west grid. Let's use our power as a nation to build a national project that creates good jobs, that strengthens us for the future, where we connect the low-cost energy from jurisdictions and provinces across this beautiful land and have low-cost energy for businesses, for people, so we can build a stronger economy. That's the energy of the future.
Get the political ideas of an 18-year-old sociology student.
The pipeline built, yes, TMX built. That's why oil exports up 50% over the course of the last few years. Secondly,
I don't think that's a bragging point, though.
Mr. Singh is absolutely right about the east-west grid interconnections, which is part of the energy corridor. Huge opportunities for this country. We have to be able to do more than one thing. Third point, fundamental point. We can give ourselves far more than Donald Trump can ever take away. If we have one Canadian economy,
He's
not
trying to
13, if
stabilize
we
himself
just look
on the name
at
of
that
Donald
agreement
Trump.
we got with the provinces. Look at what Ontario and Nova Scotia have just announced in terms of their steps towards this. This is within our grasp.
Monsieur Blanchet, what should we be
gotta
prepared
stabilize
to
yourself
concede
there.
in our negotiations with the United States?
I want to be back to something that Mr. Carney said. You can't do something and the opposite, and you can't fill people's mind with nonsense. Quebec has, by law, its own environmental review institution, and you cannot, through a federal decision, even through a Quebec government decision, go over the BAP, as we call it. If the BAP says no,
Just say,
it's no.
I know. I know.
Good.
I know,
Let's
but this
keep
is
that in mind.
This is the point. This is, if I may, this is the point. The federal government can do the following, which is to take the decision to abide by the decision of the Quebec BAP. That is within the federal government's power. That is known as cooperative federalism. That's what we need to
And
do.
do you
in a-
understand
this
one
is
other
what-
point
This is
fast?
what we need. This is what we need to do in a crisis.
Brèvement ici, and then Mr. Poilievre.
Carney can stabilize himself when he can speak like a bureaucrat. Every time he has to start the dynamic, he falls apart.
To 14 years, Mr. Trump will be 90 years old, not president no more,
might-
and somebody
try.
of course, less terrible will be there before you can even dream of having oil through this pipeline of yours.
We're less than a minute to go. Mr. Poilievre, I promised you next.
Listen, after the last 10 years of Liberals blocking pipelines and killing jobs.
Sounds wild when you
We
say that.
actually need to get things
That makes
done.
sense.
We need a change, and our conservative plan for change will repeal the No New Pipelines law. It will create a true one-stop shop, set up shovel-ready zones with pre-permitting so that we can approve LNG liquefaction export plants, mines, pipelines, nuclear plants, and also
said no to that.
hydroelectric dams so that we can generate the power we need to be strong, self-reliant, and stand on our own 2 feet for a change.
Last quick.
He's doing a lot. When I pause it, I'm going to be very sparing about it. He's doing a lot because what he's trying to do with his body language, with what he's saying, with the way he challenges Mark Carney, is he goes after him like he's a boss in doing an employee review, talking about how Carney, you're not making sense. You said this day and this is, and then he kind of goes back to this is my strong stance I want to take. Carney's very peevish and kind of sensitive every time he gets challenged, and it looks so bad. And then Singh's just obviously barely even there. I'll just do again one super chat, keep caught up. Darren Cavish for $20 says, love your videos and commentary. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you, Darren, for supporting the show, and hope you like the program tonight.
Quick word to Mr. Carney.
Okay, quick word. Bringing it back to what we were talking about, which is tariffs, the threats to Canada, how to negotiate. We need these options. We need these options to build domestically, to build one Canadian economy. We need to act. We need to diversify our trade partners.
And that is
will
our
give us
time in
strength
this
to
segment.
the US.
That is our time. Okay, you know my job tonight. I got to be the heavy guy here every now and then, making sure everybody comes to time. And I'm keeping an eye as well on making sure that everybody gets rough justice over here. That
I am
concludes
liking
our
bacon
first
so
section
far.
and our first debate. Up next, affordability and the cost of living.
Our goal is to double the pace of housing
I can
construction.
even
Lower your
we don't need to see this wall.
By open debate format. And Mr. Polyev, you get the first question this time. Many provinces, including some provinces with conservative governments, have ambitious housing targets, none of which have been met. Why do you think your housing plan will be any different?
Let me start by talking to the young people of the nation and those who are aspiring to home ownership. You know, it was only 10 years ago you could buy an average house for $450,000. But in the last lost Liberal decade, housing costs have doubled, rising faster than in any country in the G7. And so now our youth cannot afford a home, and our seniors are worried about being evicted. We can't afford a fourth Liberal term of rising housing costs. We need a change. And our conservative plan for change will, 1, axe the federal sales tax on new homes. 2, incentivize municipalities to cut their construction taxes to bring houses down in cost by $100,000. 3, sell off federal land for homes. And 4, train up 350,000 young trades workers who can help build those homes. Because you deserve a home, and we're going to make it happen for a change.
Also on the issue of affordability, Ms. Singh, you get the next question. How do you bring down grocery prices in the midst of a trade war?
I appreciate the question. This is a big concern. When I talk to Canadians, they tell me they're really feeling squeezed from the cost of living. That's one of the top things that people tell me about. People are saying, I can't afford to buy groceries. Every time I go to the grocery store, it's just ongoing worry and this feeling of anxiety that can I actually afford the things that my family needs? On top of that, people are worried about the cost of homes. I think those are the two biggest things I hear. So we could do things about this. Other countries have taken concrete steps. We can put in a price cap on food essentials. France has done it. Greece has done it to great success. It's brought down the cost of food significantly in both those jurisdictions. We can also ban corporate landlords from buying up the affordable homes to keep homes that are affordable.
By the way, it's a conspiracy theory that corporate landlords are buying up homes.
To take on the powerful corporations that are ripping you off,
There are some, but not many.
price gouging you. And we know that price gouging is one of the major reasons why food prices are going up. You're never going to hear Pierre Poilievre or Mr. Carney talk about the fact that these are the corporations.
Thank you,
ripping
Mr.
off.
Singh. That's time. Mr. Blanchet, I want to ask you about old age security, which will soon cost this country $100 billion annually. We understand you would like to expand it. How would you pay for that?
We would want it to be just for everybody because the Liberals have created the discrimination against elders, which are 65 to 75 years old, having 10% less income from federal government than those who are over 75. But the best way to do it is to have everybody pay its fair share in terms of tax, which means that one should not be entitled to hide money in fiscal paradise in order not to pay him or his clients or friends not to pay billions of dollars in taxes that could be used to help the situation of elders. Those are things which are supposed to be applied to.
By the way, I am putting people in timeout if they start spamming.
Sorry about that. Other ways to do it is to reduce the pressure on housing price, to make sure that the whole budget of elders and families and workers can afford houses which have increased dramatically in price.
Merci, Monsieur Blanchet.
recently.
That's time for this one. Mr. Carney, I want to ask you about housing, which over the past decade has gone from a problem to a crisis while the Liberals were in power. Is your policy on getting homes built any different from your predecessors, and how?
This is one of the reasons why I entered this contest, because of the housing crisis, the cost of living crisis, the housing crisis, and the Trump crisis to help fix it.
You had to
and I
get
would
Trump's
say
name in
the
there.
housing approach is fundamentally different because we need a fundamentally different approach. We need to build housing at a rate that we haven't seen since the end of the Second World War. We do need a fundamentally
try and
different approach.
change that
And with the
into-
fundamentally different approach, we can build an entirely new industry. So the question is how? Now, Mr. Poilievre and I agree on some things. Okay, I agree as well on reducing the tax on first-time home purchases as a way to buy. But I am focused on increasing the supply of homes and doing that in a way that uses Canadian technology and modular prefabricated housing, that uses Canadian lumber, including in reinforced timber, and uses Canadian workers. And in all respects, we're scaling up to double the rate of home building.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. That's time. We now move to open forum here. And Mr. Singh, you get the first comment. Many of you have pledged to cut the GST on many aspects of buying a home. And Mr. Singh, I want to ask you, would you cut the GST on anything else in order to make life more affordable?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm the only one on this stage that fought to give people a GST holiday. Interestingly, while that GST holiday helps working class folks, middle class folks by taking off the GST off essentials, the Conservatives under Pierre Poilievre voted against that. They opposed the idea of giving people, actual folks that need help, a tax break, and would rather give millionaires a tax break, which shows you whose side he's on, which is not surprising. But what is surprising is that Mr. Carney also said that giving people a break on their GST is a bad idea. Mr. Carney, why do you think giving a tax break to capital gains folks that earn more than $1 million is a good idea, but helping a family afford their groceries, helping people afford their bills for their internet, their cell phone, their home heating, giving them relief to take the GST off those is a bad idea, but giving a tax break to people who really only earn over more than $1.4 million, that's somehow a good idea.
Okay, you went after
That's your numbers.
You went
And I
after
am banning
Mr. Poilievre first, so
scammers,
I'm
by
gonna
the
give him
way.
the first shot
We really
to
need to
respond.
deputize people as moderators
Mr. Carney,
someday.
the reality is
just never
that
had to do
housing
that.
costs doubled under the Liberal government. While Justin Trudeau made exactly the same promises that you are now repeating today. He promised that he would double home building. In fact, home building went down. He promised that he'd reduce the cost. In fact, it went up. And here we are. Mark Carney is asking for a fourth Liberal term, repeating the exact same Liberal promises that priced you out of a house. Just a few weeks ago, before the election, the Liberals voted against taking the GST off new homes, and they have continued to build up bureaucracies that block construction. We need a change so that you can afford a home, and our change will be, again, to axe the sales tax on new homes, incentivize municipalities to speed up permits, free up land, and cut development costs. Train up 350,000 young people who can be in the trades to build those homes and sell off the land that is going to be needed in order to build homes. That is a real plan for you to own a home and afford your life for a change.
Mr. Carney, they're coming at you from both sides. What do you say?
Okay. I know it may be difficult, Mr. Poilievre. You spent years running against Justin Trudeau on the carbon tax, and they're both gone. Okay, they're both gone. And we're in a new
impersonation of them with the same policies tonight.
Very different. Look, I'm a very different person from Justin Trudeau.
Having to say it
Focus
doesn't
on
really
the
mean
result.
it. His
And so
economic
how
advisor.
to
You never
drive
have to say it.
results in the housing market, you've got to change the model of building. You've got to increase the financing for housing developers, $25 billion on the table for those housing developers, $10 billion for deeply affordable homes, cutting development charges in half, lowering the cost of the building of those homes by 20%. and lowering the emissions and the run costs of those homes by another 20%. This is how you drive affordability. This is how you bring young people back into the housing.
Yeah,
market.
Monsieur
exactly what
Blanchet,
Trudeau
and then Mr.
promised.
Singh.
You claim to be very different from Mr. Trudeau. Now, the point is to show that you are any better than Mr. Trudeau. You claim to have a lot of experience in many things, and you know things. Last time we had somebody saying that they knew things, it was the senators, and they killed the law that protected supply management because they knew better than us and were elected by nobody, exactly like you are today. You say that you are a great crisis manager. Which one? I heard of nothing. As far as I know, Brexit happened, even if you were against it. You say you are a great negotiator. What have you negotiated but fiscal paradises in Bermudas or Cayman Islands? You have to prove something, and you have to reveal what you own in those companies if you want people to believe you.
Mr. Singh, you wanted it.
Yes, returning
Okay.
to the topic
Good on
of
the
housing.
closed chat
It's
mode.
very important. Obviously, we need to build homes that people can
I made
afford.
it subscriber only.
Mr. Poilievre had the opportunity to show us what he could do. He was the Minister of Housing under Stephen Harper. And during that time, guess how many homes he built? He built 6 homes during that entire time. This is not something you can
This is the
trust to
dumbest
build
attack
homes.
ever.
He built 6
200,000.
homes. And this has
200,000.
been confirmed again and again. He built
200,000.
6 homes. That's it. Now, the problem, though, with Mr. Carney is while he's laid out a plan, the problem is that when he was the chair of Brookfield Investments, this is a company that made a strategic decision to buy up affordable homes in cities like Toronto, where people were paying a decent rent. And they purposely bought those homes, kicked out the tenants, and jacked up the rents. That is not someone you can trust, sadly, to deal with the housing crisis when Mr. Carney, you profited off of it.
We're going to get responses here. Mr. Poilievre first, Mr. Carney second.
First of all, Mr. Singh,
gonna hold this up to remind you.
the Toronto
6 right here.
Star, the Toronto Star debunked your
No,
falsehoods
it was
on
6
that.
homes, and
I
that's the
appreciate
facts.
neither Liberals or NDP are very good with math, but in that
You're
year, the
clearly-
year I
you
was
can
the
count up to
minister, if I
6, which
could,
is great.
the year
Let him
I
Mr.
was
Singh, let's let him answer.
in the year I
It's not
was
high enough, though.
the year I was minister, we had 200,000 homes built, and guess what the average price of a home was at the time? $450,000.
And guess what happened
And
at the end of the conservative reign?
one bedrooms
It
rented
doubled.
out for $900, and that since that time, housing costs
Things
have
actually
doubled
helping
under the
Poilievre.
Liberals.
They doubled
And now
on
we
the
have,
accidentally
now we
spending
have
a lot
Mr.
of money
Carney
on 'em.
making tens of billions of dollars of spending promises that
They
will
doubled under you
ultimately
as well.
continue to build bureaucracy. We don't need more bureaucracy in Ottawa. We tried that for 10 Liberal years, Mr. Carney. What we need is to build homes in communities.
Certainly
and
don't
that
need
means
conservatives.
axing taxes on home building and getting the government out of the way so that builders can actually build.
I think-
Mr.
Mr.
Carney,
Can I pick up-
you are on housing. We need
Can
a
I-
change, and you, sir, are not a change.
Mark
Uh,
Carney.
He keeps pounding that same
I'm gonna
drum,
pick
and
up
it's
on-
good.
I
He needs
thought
to
that
keep
answer
basically
was quite
turning to
revealing.
Carney and saying,
The
you guys aren't
first
the
thing
solution,
is
or that you're
that,
offering the same thing.
It's an attitude towards housing that absolutely ignores affordable housing, deeply affordable housing, issues with vulnerable people, ignores the rental market, ignores all other aspects of it. So the 6 are the relevant. Mr. Singh is absolutely right. The 6 are the relevant.
200,000.
The 200,000 are a different part of the housing market. There are many Canadians. There are many Canadians at different income levels. The second thing it reveals is a misunderstanding, I'll be polite, of how the government's balance sheet can catalyze enormous private
There's using
investment.
catalyze
And that
word,
is what
yeah.
we need to do to solve the housing crisis. It happens to be what we need to do as a whole to address the economic crisis that's been forced on us by President Trump.
Mr. Blanchet?
Yeah. You have
It's so
spoken
weak.
much more than I have,
Bringing
so I
that
want to ask a
President Trump
question
word
and
that
we'll
he's going
make
to
a
get a bunch of
statement.
people
and
being like,
instead.
oh, he's the one against
I'm
Trump.
not saying,
Everyone's
no,
trying
I'm
to
not
put it in
saying
the
that you cannot do what you pretend that you are able to do.
Yeah.
We just have no proof
Absolutely,
so
Tom
far.
can.
I'm saying quite clearly that you cannot be entitled to do it alone. You cannot be entitled to hold all the power in your 2 hands. You cannot go out there and fix things for
Thank you,
Canada
D-Man,
and
for letting me
Quebec
know there's a mic
without
drop
being
happening soon.
seriously checked by serious people. You cannot go out there and speak for Quebec without Quebec having its own strong voice to protect itself and to promote its different economy. So if you want to collaborate, let's say right now that whatever happens, even if minority government happens, you will be a partner with the different Quebec economy and identity, which you have been not interested in for the economic part and not respectful for the identity.
Let me get Mr. Singh in at this
thank you.
point. Can you tell us what's the first thing you would do to make life more affordable for Canadians?
There's a lot of things that we can do, and I've
I'm
laid
going
out
to
some
turn
of
the
those things. I think
country into a communist
fundamentally,
coup
I'm the
war.
only person on stage that not only fought for real relief for people in terms of affordability, I'm the only one that fought for
Oh, you're
pharmacare
just a fighter.
that actually makes life more affordable by giving people medication coverage, dental care that gives people more affordability by letting them access their services if you're a senior and a kid. I fought for childcare to make sure people could afford childcare. All measures that Mr. Polyev voted against, all measures that Mr. Blanchet voted
Not a
against. So
good
if you
attack
want
against
someone that's going to
politics.
fight for
Nobody's
you in
voting
Ottawa
Poilievre's going to hear.
to actually make life more affordable, you can't entrust
Nobody likes
all the
dental care
power
and voting
to
conservative.
Mr. Carney.
It's a stupid
He
program.
doesn't have a track record of making life more affordable for people, but we do. So vote for a New Democrat, and we'll continue this work to make life more affordable for you, while the Conservatives and the Bloc have voted against those measures to make life affordable, because that's not who they care about. New Democrats are in it for you.
Pierre Polyev.
The number one expense for families today is taxes, more than they spend on food, clothing, and shelter combined. This after 10
He
years
has all his best
of
lines
liberal
off. Like I've
tax
heard him say these
increases.
things
We
before, but
can't
it's just
afford
like a great
a
expense.
fourth term of high liberal taxes. That's why Conservatives have a plan for change. And that plan
Your plan
includes
voted
cutting
against every
your-
measure to help
if
people
I
out.
could, cutting income taxes by 15% for the average worker and senior, saving a working couple up to $2,000, rewarding hard work again. Because
How much
hard
do you think
work
childcare
is
costs?
actually being
Dental care
punished.
costs.
Is actually being punished because of the very high taxes. Now, the Liberals promised 10 years ago they would lower them. They actually raised taxes on 9 out of 10 Canadians. We need a change in this country because your hard work should once again pay off with a powerful paycheck that buys you an affordable food, affordable home
So you want to save
on a
people
safe
$2,000.
street, and that's what we will deliver.
Some of the slogans got mixed up there, but generally speaking, he's doing a really good job just delivering the lines that he's been delivering at rallies for a long time. But the vast majority of people have still not heard them. So this has been very good. And even right here, it's a great look at the body language. Polyev is grabbing the podium, standing up straight. Carney's looking like Mr. Burns, moving his two like dinosaur claws back and forth, and Jagmeet Singh's trying to get an edge in, like a word in edgewise here, even though nobody cares what he's saying.
You want to save people $2,000, but cut their dental care,
That's
which
false. False.
is thousands of dollars. Cut their child care, which is thousands of dollars. Cut pharmacare coverage, which is thousands of dollars.
False.
That's not a very good math deal right there. You're gonna save people $2,000, but cost them tens of thousands of dollars. That's
How
why
did
you
it
cannot
turn into
afford
tens of
conservatives,
thousands of dollars?
And you certainly can't
False.
trust the Liberals
Mark
on their
Carney's
own.
turn.
You need New Democrats.
Mark Carney.
I'm going to reinforce that point, and then I'll respond to Mr. Blanchet. Childcare in this country, $3,000 to $10,000 a year for a family, depending on where you live.
Province
Okay,
jurisdiction.
Right. Depending on where you live, that's what's being saved there. $800 per trip to the dentist. We've expanded dental
Province
care to 8
jurisdiction.
million Canadians.
Because we
8
forced-
million Canadians.
I hate this stupid dental care thing. Yeah, yes, you get free dental care now. If you went out right now and you just bought private dental insurance, where you get 2 teeth cleanings a year at a massively subsidized cost, it costs you like $30 a month, and that's without doing any insurance packaging with other types of insurance. That is $30 a month, and it would probably be less if you packaged it with eye care and other things. But like they're patting themselves on the back for effectively not even saving you any money, just ruining the dental system.
Because New Democrats are there.
Pharmacare. These are fundamental issues for affordability. We're talking about affordability and taking them off in order.
And that's why you
to
need
cut
New Democrats.
tax.
That's
Quebec
not what I've said.
and
I
in
will be
terms
cutting
of
income taxes
working with Quebec.
for Canadians.
Yes, absolutely. Throughout the short time I've been Prime Minister, working directly with the Premier of Quebec, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, our Minister of Finance are from Quebec. Quebec and Quebec issues, whether it's
Why
supply
haven't you answered
management,
Mr.
language,
Legault's letter? He asked 5 things in the letter. He reduced his expectations.
we're talking about
and you did not even answer him. And tonight, you are so much in love with Quebec.
Steve, the question that Canadians have
What
to
was that
ask
one from Mark?
why
Carney?
is whether why
He's got the,
cost you
Mr.
tens of
Singh,
thousands.
Mr. Singh, sorry, he has the floor. Come on.
the question you have to ask is, after a decade of liberal promises, can you afford food? Is your housing more affordable than it used to be? What is your cost of living like compared to what it was a decade ago? And are you prepared to elect the same liberal MPs, the same liberal ministers, the same liberal staffers all over again for a fourth term. Mr. Carney, Justin Trudeau's staffers are actually here with you at this debate in Montreal, writing the talking points that you are regurgitating into the microphone. How can we possibly believe that you are any different than the previous 10 years of Liberal government?
25 seconds.
That was amazing. That was brilliant. That's like a walk-off home run. That is actually an angle I would have never considered someone bringing up. That's F's in the chat for Mark Carney's political career right there. That was incredible. That was brilliant. I actually want to see what he's going to follow up with this. Just quickly, I'm just going to take a quick super chat so I do catch up a little bit. Programmer X says dodging questions like Neo dodging bullets in the Matrix. Yeah, he was saying that early on in the debate, and yes, and Mark Carney has continued dodging questions, pivoting off them, and then saying something boring instead of actually answering the question.
Is left in this segment for you to respond to that.
Look, I do my own talking points. Thank you very much. The biggest risk we have to affordability, the biggest risk we have to this economy is Donald Trump. So first and foremost, we've got to get that right. Secondly, we need to do it in a way that brings everyone along together. That means preserving pharmacare, dental care, child care, reinforcing health care, spending our
intrusion in Quebec jurisdiction over and again. I like if we're any better than we are. Is there one thing Canadians can do that Quebecers cannot do? You are doing intrusions in our jurisdiction with our money, pretending you are better, and most of the time you try to copy what we did with our own money against us. What's that? As a policy, don't you have your own things to care about?
That really is time for this segment. I wanted to be polite and let everybody finish their points, but
far behind,
we got to move on.
I took the liberty.
Thank you. Okay, that ends section 2. Up next, public safety and security.
Dude, all these topics are fantastic for the Conservatives. Luckily, so far, they haven't started off with. I'm going to bring up this for a second, but it's like, guys, climate change is really serious. And here is a little girl on camera saying that I don't want my house to burn up because of climate change. We have luckily avoided that. And again, Poilievre has been doing a good, punch to the gut of Carney and then swiveling back and being the nice guy who's here to tell you his positive vision for a more affordable Canada. It's perfect. He slugs the guy and then he swings back over and talks about what he's going to do. That's very positive, smiles, and sounds very confident. Carney is boring. He is placid. He has not much to say in a lot of these segments. It's terrible. He's just basically saying, I'm going to keep everything very moderate and in the middle, and don't worry, everything's going to be better now. That hit on the staffers writing his talking points was so good, because it's kind of one of those peek behind the curtain type lines to zing somebody with, that you realize that everyone this guy's walking around with are the same people Justin Trudeau is walking around with, and he's not directing them, they're directing him. Thank you, James Dabon, for the $13.99 super chat. Must be 450 degrees in there because bro is getting roasted. Thanks for the awesome analysis, Wyatt. Keep it up. Well, thank you for your $13.99 super chat. And yes, this thing has been like the reenactment of the assassination of Caesar.
And out
To our
Security. For a lot of people, that means the fentanyl crisis. I'd like to know what you could contribute to ending that crisis in this country.
Oh my goodness, we're starting
the French crisis is a very serious issue, which is a bit less important in Quebec than it is in British Columbia. I think the whole border thing is the real issue. Immigration is a very important issue for Quebecers. Immigration has to be dealt with in an orderly fashion. Our borders are not dealt with in an orderly fashion. The rules are not respected. The rules are unclear. Some rules even invite people to hide for 2 weeks illegally before coming out. Some things has to be done. The situation of one person asking for asylum may take as much as 4 years without us reducing the number in order to deal with them in a human way. The services for every citizen in Quebec are being reduced because we cannot afford the fact that we are receiving much, much more people in Quebec from this specific type of immigration than we can afford, and we cannot teach them French.
That's time, Mr. Blanchet. We can, of course, return to the immigration issue during open debate should you
We
choose
will.
to. Mr. Carney, question for you. The liberal gun buyback policy, not considered a success by many people. Reviving it is in your platform.
Yeah.
Why would it work this time?
Yeah, I think, well, what we've seen with that policy is some success at the commercial level, but not at the individual level, because it hasn't been, in my opinion, it hasn't been organized properly, and it needs to be organized properly. And I've instructed the Minister of National Security and Public Safety in order to do that. So part of this is a different focus of government, a focus on results, a focus on clear milestones in the short term. Let me make a broader point, though, on gun, which is that we have a problem with guns coming over borders, which is why we've tightened our borders. We have an issue, though, with a
He actually only did it because Donald Trump forced him to do it.
gun industry that is continually coming up with new forms of assault rifles, mass killing machines. We banned over 2,000 of these.
So ignorant.
Every single time there has been a vote in the House of Commons on gun control, Mr. Poilievre has voted against it. You can't be tough on crime unless you're tough on guns.
Mr. Poilievre, you can come back on that in the open debate if you want to, but my question for you in this segment is, Indigenous people are statistically overrepresented in our corrections system. Are you concerned that your tough on crime platform will make that worse?
I'm sorry, but did somebody commit the crime? Because I don't want to sound, generic, but you should do the time. This is such a stupid point. This is where I don't think Steve Paikin wrote these questions, but my goodness, what a stupid thing to say. Do you think that this might disproportionately affect Indigenous people? No, it's going to disproportionately affect criminals. That's who it affects. Guess who you are protecting if you arrest an Indigenous person who's a criminal? You're protecting all of the other Indigenous people who are not criminals, who want to run their businesses and want to live in their homes safely. If you arrest a white guy, I'm not like, oh my goodness, they're oppressing white people. I look at it as good. Get that criminal off my neighborhood streets.
I'm concerned that Indigenous people are disproportionately the victims of crime.
Perfect
I'll
response.
give you the example of a wonderful group of Indigenous people who came under attack in Saskatchewan, and many of them were murdered. Killer was out of jail after 60 prior convictions. This is the result of 10 years of liberal laws that allow the same offenders to be released dozens and dozens of times, even when it's known they are a danger. We can't risk a fourth liberal term of soft on crime policies. We need a change. And the Conservative plan for change will bring in a 3 strikes you're outlaw, 3 convictions for serious crimes, you go to jail for at least 10 years, maybe for life, no chance of parole or bail.
This has been the perfect roll off of that really bad question. If anything, he actually turned that bad question into a brilliant answer. That would have been better than him just getting a straight up question about crime being high.
We will bring in life sentences for traffickers of fentanyl, human beings, and guns, and we will secure our borders to keep the illegal
Thank you,
guns
Mr.
out.
Poilievre. That's time. Mr. Singh, your question is about the RCMP, because you've got RCMP reform in your platform. What, in your view, is the problem with the RCMP?
Well, some of the basis for this is the concern that's been raised in more rural communities and northern communities that there have been some serious concerns about violence or inappropriate use of force when it comes to the execution of their duties.
You can tell Jagmeet Singh didn't want this to be brought up because he does that virtue signaling stuff on social media for all the leftists. He doesn't actually want normal people to hear that he hates the RCMP.
We want to make sure that we've got a top-tier police force that provides security and safety to those communities in a way that's sensitive and understanding of the communities they're serving. I also think what's very important is for Indigenous communities, Indigenous policing. This is an area of deep concern. I think everyone in our country should be safe. You should be able to be safe at home, safe when you go to work, safe if you take public transit, safe for your kids to be able to play in the local playground. And that's something I'm committed to. And the other area that I'm focused on when it comes
We're
to
going to get that by getting rid of the
is
RCMP.
making sure we prevent crime before it happens. And that's why we want to see increased investments in our border security. We saw under the Conservatives, they cut 1,100 border officers in one day. So that prevented our ability to keep our borders safe. That stops those
Okay,
materials from
Mr.
coming
Singh,
into the
that's
country.
time. Not sure it was about the RCMP, but maybe we can get back to that during the open debate segment, which we go to right now. And Mr. Poilievre, you get the first word on this one, and it sort of dovetails on the last answer you gave, which is you have pledged to be the first prime minister in this country to use the notwithstanding clause, setting aside charter rights of, as you call them, multiple murderers. Why do you think that's necessary?
To be clear, I want to uphold the charter rights of Canadians under Section 7 to life, liberty, and security of the person. Right now, that right is violated by multiple murderers who are given discounts. The case in question was a gentleman who went into a mosque and shot dead 6 innocent worshipers. He got, according to this ruling, only one 25-year sentence, meaning he can be out in his 50s. He only serves 4 years for every murder that he carried out. That is outrageous. And I will use the constitutional powers that are created for this purpose to ensure that mass murderers stay in maximum security penitentiary for life. They will only come out in a box. We will also pass tough new laws that prevent...
It doesn't matter how much the mainstream media tries to pretend that Canadians are fundamentally socially liberal. People will eat the stuff up, rightfully so, because it's morally correct. And Canadians fundamentally are like Americans. They're like people from the UK. They're like people from Ireland. They're like people from France. They're like people from Nigeria. They don't like crime. And this is a very good stance to win back older voters who are leaning a little bit liberal.
Repeat offenders from getting out. If you commit 3 offenses under the 3 strikes law I propose, you will not be allowed out of jail until you prove that you are drug-free, that you are behaved perfectly, and that you've learned an employable skill, and you've served a 10-year sentence. We cannot allow liberal crime and chaos to go on terrorizing our communities. What we need is a real plan for change so that we can bring back the safety and the security that Canadians used to take for granted.
Let me get Mr. Carney to respond to that. Do you think that's an appropriate use of the notwithstanding clause of the Charter?
I think that the one of the core responsibilities of the federal government, Prime Minister, is to defend the fundamental rights and liberties of Canadians. And those fundamental rights and liberties of Canadians are outlined in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is 43 years old literally today. I think it's a very dangerous slope to override judgments of the Supreme Court of Canada. In fact, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms exists to protect Canadians from people like us on the stage, politicians who may use their power to override fundamental rights. And the issue in using by the federal government, I'll stop here, is not where you start, but where will you stop?
Mr. Poilievre, I should get Mr. Poilievre on that. Is it a slippery slope if you use it in this case?
I must say, I would be quite interested too, because Mr. Carney said that he didn't want us to use the notwithstanding clause before adopting a law. And yesterday he said that he felt that it was wrong to use the notwithstanding clause after a law is adopted. So if we cannot use it before and we cannot use it after, it means that Mr. Carney believes that we should never use it. But it is very important. And the Ford case made it clear. The Constitution says how it should be used, but never how or what we will do with it, because it's the prerogative of the provinces. So do you want the Supreme Court to overrule another judgment of the same Supreme Court because you don't like it? Because that would be being the hell of a politician as you define them.
Well, let me just start by saying, first of all, yeah, thank you.
That was actually a great jab by Blanchette about talking about the double standards of Mark Carney. Too bad it didn't go back to Mark Carney, because that guy was going to fumble that football hard. But now we have Jagmeet Singh here to absolutely miss the point of the entire conversation.
I just started by saying, let's not let Mr. Poilievre get away with making this ludicrous claim that anyone on this stage thinks that violent crime should get a less severe penalty. Obviously, that is not a special position that he's taking. Everyone agrees that horrible crimes should have horrible sentences. Judges are equipped to do that. So don't let Mr. Poilievre's rhetoric confuse people.
Jagmeet Singh is in favor of DEI sentencing policy, where we take into account your identity to decide whether you really should be going away for 25 years for killing somebody, or because you're this and that, and so you should only get 8 years. That's actually Jagmeet Singh's position. That's why he doesn't like the RCMP, because they're too tough on certain communities, because too many people get locked up for committing violent crimes.
Obviously, everyone agrees that if someone does something horrible, they should pay a horrible price for it. There should be appropriate sentence that's put in place by a judge.
Your punishment is listening to Jagmeet Singh attempt to debate.
But what I'm concerned about is all of what Mr. Poilievre is talking about is after the fact. Now, there's heinous things that happen, and there needs to be severe penalties put in place. But we also need to keep communities safe. And that's what my focus is. Well, how do we stop crime before it happens? Much of the violent crime that's committed is committed by illegal handguns and firearms that come across the border. Now, Mr. Poilievre has admitted that as well, that it is illegal handguns and illegal weapons that are used in violent crime. So our plan is, let's stop those illegal weapons getting into our country in the first place. And the way we do that is by having stronger border security officers and having more people on the border. Mr. Pierre Poilievre, when he was in power in the Conservatives, they cut the number of border officers. They reduced the number, weakening our borders.
Keeping an eye on time
Can't
here.
trust them.
Let's get back to Mr. Poilievre on the issue of whether, in using the notwithstanding clause under these circumstances, would be a kind of a slippery slope and encourage politicians to use it more.
No, we will use it to protect the charter rights of law-abiding Canadians. I'm interested in the rights of victims. Mr. Carney seems to be very interested in the rights of criminals. He says that it's dangerous for me to ensure that mass murderers stay behind bars for life. You know what's dangerous? Turning them loose on our streets. I don't think you appreciate, sir, the chaos that is unfolding in communities. In Toronto right now, the police have been forced to tell people to just let the thief steal the car. When they break into the house, just take the keys. Just let them take the keys so that you don't get hurt. People are living in terror in many of our communities precisely because of the catch and release bail law, C-75, which requires judges release the accused at the earliest opportunity under the least onerous conditions. Every single member of your Liberal caucus and your Liberal cabinet voted in favor of this bill, and they are all determined to keep it in place despite constant promises to the contrary. Mr. Carney, Canadians deserve to live in peace and security. That is the right that I'm fighting for a change.
I'm fighting for that as well. And let me be specific about two things that have been raised. The first is with respect to these issues of car theft, home invasion, and I'll use the GTA area where there has been a sharp increase. How do you attack that? You attack it several ways. One, you increase the criminal penalties for that happening, particularly if you're part of a gang, particularly if you use a firearm. And
they literally have Bill C-5 that reduces sentences for carrying illegal handguns. It is like the nicest law you've ever passed for gangs. And he was part of that government when it was happening. He was an advisor. Yes, just an economic advisor, but he only at this moment does he even kind of talked about how we need harsher sentences, only now on this debate stage.
And we're doing so. We've committed to doing so. You put in place a reverse bonus in terms of bail so that it has to be proven that there's not a risk, which we've also committed to. And then you go to what Mr. Singh was talking about, which is we have to reinforce our frontiers. That's why we're committing to an extra 1,000 Canada Border Service agents, an extra 1,000 RCMPs. That's why, as part of the broader fentanyl initiative, where we've added to the RCMP there, we've added drones, we're adding helicopters, we're adding surveillance, and we're going to the other end of the chain with respect to car theft, which is tightening security at the ports. This is what we need. In order to get results, you need to focus at both ends of the chains in federal.
Thank you very much. I want to talk about one of the issues that has come up is the idea of the public safety concerns around the overdose crisis and how this is devastating our communities. We're seeing so many lives being lost. In that, we know that one of the ways to address that is by investing in some of the solutions like mental health services and rehabilitation services. Services keep our communities safe, having access to those good services. Both Mr. Carney and Mr. Poilievre are proposing cutting government spending and cutting those services. That's not going to make our community safer. We need to see better investments in rehabilitation services, more investments in mental health. We need to respond to this serious crisis in our country with care and compassion. I've met with Moms Stop the Harm, an organization of moms that have lost their children to this opioid overdose crisis. They've literally had their children have died because of this. And they're saying we need to do everything possible to save lives, to stop this death from happening. And I think we need to listen to those moms. And that's my commitment.
Mr. Blanchet.
Two things as rapidly as possible. First, we believe that we should act on crime gangs and organizations, defining them as we do for terrorist organization. We have to protect our kids from the violence of those gangs, from the drugs being sold by those gangs, from the...
Isn't this technically a Trump point to start designating large gangs as terrorist organizations? I support Blanchet on that, but I would just point out that he probably wouldn't like it if someone else said it.
The guns and whatever else being stolen, sale being by those gangs.
Sold?
And not sold, being, you purchase a thing and selling, sold by those gangs. And we mostly have to protect our kids from being recruited by those gangs, becoming violent at 13 and 14 and 16 years old, because this is the real fear of parents like I am. This is a very dangerous situation. I want to come back to immigration because we said that we would come back to immigration. Do you remember the Century Initiative, a sad memory? Officially, they said that they had not considered Quebec difference. They had not considered Quebec language. They wanted Canada to be a 100 million people country by the end of the century. Mr. Barton told me himself that he had not even thought about the Quebec difference in that analysis. And one of his closest collaborators is now a close counselor to Mr. Carney, which seems to be part of that kind of project or ideology. So it is impossible for Canada to have all those people come into Canada. It is impossible for Quebec to receive all those people. And in Quebec, we have the language and values and secularity of the state issue, which is very important. So I say, pause. Let's do things properly. Let's receive migrants in an orderly fashion and successfully as a measure of respect for them also.
Mr. Poilievre, you wanted a word.
I speak to families all the time who are terrified by the scourge of drugs and illegal guns. And we know those guns are not Grandpa Joe's hunting rifle. So when the Liberals try to ban hunting rifles...
He stole my Grandpa Joe line. He watches my show Confirmed. I literally said Grandpa Joe the last time I was trying to come up with an old man name for the, old Uncle Farmer Joe's hunting rifle. My bill, but he's took it.
They're really going after the wrong people. 90% of guns that come in that are used in crime are smuggled illegally over the porous Liberal-run borders. And that's why the police, it's not true, and that's why the police, actually, if I could, the police actually endorsed me. The police in Barrie, in Peel, in Sault Ste. Marie have all endorsed me because they know that I will go after the gun smugglers and criminals with 2,000 extra frontline border guards that will stop the guns from coming in. But unlike the Liberals and NDP, I will not ban hunting rifles. The Liberals want to protect. I want to protect Canadians from criminals. The Liberals want to protect turkeys from hunters. I think we know which one makes more sense.
Quick intervention, Mr. Carney. Then I got.
That's actually such a good line that conservatives want to protect people from guns and they want to protect turkeys from shotguns or rifles or whatever. That's a funny line.
A question for each of you before this segment's out.
Okay. We absolutely fully support hunting and rights of hunters and Indigenous Canadians. But I want to raise an issue, which is a serious issue, talking about safety. There are people, we're in Montreal, in Toronto, across this country, who fear going to their synagogue, fear going to their community center, fear taking their children, leaving their children in school. And this has to stop. This is it's totally unacceptable. So what we're proposing is to make it a criminal offense to threaten or to impede anyone from being near or going to their place of worship, their school, their community center. This, it pains me that when we have to do it, because this is not what we should be doing as Canadians, of course.
Okay.
But we will put that in place.
Let me get
Respect. And this is a fundamental issue with respect
Let me
to
get 10
anti-Semitism.
seconds from each of you before this segment's out on what you perceive to be the biggest security threat to Canada right now. 10 seconds each. Mr. Polyev.
The physical security threat to our country is the rampant crime wave that is running out of control. After the last decade, we had a 116% increase in gun crime. We
Okay,
need to
that's
lock
10
up the
seconds.
criminals.
I got to hold you to
secure
10
the borders.
seconds. Mr. Carney?
Well, we're in a security section. I think we didn't have a chance to talk about anything internationally. I think the biggest security threat to Canada is China.
You had to throw that one in there because of the politics.
Biggest security threat, illegal guns and drugs coming across the border, and cuts to services that would make our public safety and security even worse.
Come on, you know that Jagmeet Singh wanted to say it's India and it's Modi and it's the BJP.
Last word to Monsieur Blanchet.
The fact that neither Quebec or Canada is able to protect itself, and that we are still dependent and entirely dependent on American to protect us.
Okay, that is the end of that section. Gentlemen, up next, energy and climate.
I'll pause here for just a second, then we will be skipping forward again. I'll just kind of queue it up for when the debate actually commences. It just helps me to get through a couple of super chats. Not that I want to make this all about super chats. I don't want to have like 60 of them to go when I'm over. But thank you guys for being super generous. I really, really appreciate your viewership. Milo and Odie, the Boston and Frenchie, is $2 and says, I love how they're all ganging up on Mark's Carney. Absolutely, and it's not stopped. Your comment here is evergreen. It's tapered off a little bit, but it's because Mark Carney's been kicked to death on the ground already. Hugh gives $2 and says, with pencil and then talking heads multiple times, I know what you're doing with your name, and I can't say it. It's a family program, Hugh. And he does it again, $10 with the same message, but thank you for the $10 and the $2, Hugh. Very, very helpful for the channel. Laura Milo gives $6.99. Thank you. No message attached to that, but thank you for supporting the show. Now, back to the debate.
New pipelines to get our oil and gas to market.
Well, it's not an approach I favor with public money. There's not any projects that are on the table, so it's not a specific project to look at. I favor, when it comes to the environment, building an east-west energy grid that connects low-cost energy and allows for families to reduce their electricity costs. But let's put this all in context. We're talking about what our energy solutions are in the context of a climate crisis. And we're not just talking about a climate crisis in the far future. We're living it right now. I remember I met a mom a couple of years ago before I had kids who told me she was worried about taking her kids out on some days because of the forest fires in BC. It meant that it was unsafe for kids to go outdoors. Fast forward to when I became a parent just a couple of years after that, and I literally worry about the same thing. The forest fires we saw a couple of years ago meant that many places that didn't see this before saw days where there was such smoke in the air that it was dangerous for kids. We've seen extreme weather, forest fires, heat domes, floods impacting us. We've got to do everything we can.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. That's time. Mr. Polyev, where does fighting climate change land on your list of priorities when it comes to expanding energy opportunities in this country?
It lands within our priorities of bringing home jobs while bringing down emissions around the world. Look, the reality is that if we push production out of our country to more polluting countries, it actually makes the problem worse. But that has been exactly the Liberal approach with the anti-development law, C-69, blocking of 15 LNG export plants over the last 10 years. We have seen more of those jobs go abroad. I want to bring them home. My plan will be to approve, for example, natural gas liquefaction and export. If we sent our gas to India, for example, to displace half of their demand for electricity, we could reduce emissions by 2.5 billion tons, which is 3 times the total emissions of Canada. That's the way we bring emissions down and jobs up. It's common sense. And now it's time to bring it home.
Thank you, Mr. Polyev. The next question is for Mr. Carney. How would your...
I actually really like that answer from Pierre Polyev, because usually conservatives capitulate on climate change issues and they talk about how, don't worry, we'll have our own program, we'll do something. Just state the fact that, hey, if you care about emissions, if we send our oil and gas overseas, we will actually reduce far more emissions than just cutting ourselves off at the knees here. And in fact, doing that will just push people to use more coal overseas.
government fast-track pipelines and mining projects while also following the Supreme Court decision that requires consent of Indigenous communities?
Well, I think the first thing, and this goes back a bit to where we started, which is recognizing that we are in a crisis. We need to act with maximum force, and having a process and a consultation, but a consultation with a purpose, which is to identify those projects, those investments of national interest that are really going to move the dial in terms of growth, jobs, energy security, while being consistent with long-term competitiveness, which necessarily means lower carbon. And so part of that process is ensuring that First Nations, Indigenous peoples, are there from the start. It also includes their ability to participate fully in those projects. And that's why, and I know I can tell, you've got to tell on when I've gone on too long, so I'll finish up, which is
So bad.
That's why we're doubling. Our proposal is to double the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program to $10 billion. What does that actually mean? It means an ability for them to invest equity in
Thank
those
you, Mr.
projects
Carney,
and be
that's
full
time.
partners. Thank you.
My tell is my clock, and my clock is at 0, so that's how it goes. Monsieur Blanchet, do you still oppose pipeline construction in Quebec, even though a majority of Quebecers now apparently say they support it?
We will know about that when we have held the debate about that, which has not begun yet. We are just beginning it. First, we are hearing very creative numbers, and we are being fed nonsense. And we will be back to it in a few minutes. But energy, trade, commerce is from south to north or north to south. And it's true in Quebec also. In a little more than 3 years, Donald Trump won't be in office, and there will be not one more pipeline having been built once we get there. So let's be serious, responsible, and we will be back with the numbers. We don't want to pay in Quebec for such monstrosities, which will provide us with nothing.
We now move to open debate, and you all will get a chance. Or
I just want to interrupt you guys for a second to show this on screen. This is the current Google Trends charts in Canada over the past hour. You can see that big spike when he had that big moment, Polyev, calling out Carney for having his scripts written by his own team, and he stayed consistently pretty near the top. And overall, he has been the most searched candidate on stage during the debate.
or have had a chance to get the first shot at this. Monsieur Blanchet, it is your turn to get the first shot. Canada has a substantial supply of critical minerals, which are in high demand. Are you in favor of allowing these minerals to be mined?
Of course, it has to be done properly. Quebec has probably the most important clean phosphate reserves in North America. In Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, it is very important. It has to be exploited. This is the best way to use Paul Saguenay as an infrastructure that we need. We have lithium. Everybody needs lithium. Transportation has to be taken from oil to clean energy. This is what we want to be working on. It is part of the specifics of Quebec economy. So we are in favor of that. But we don't want to pay for the $30 billion which have been spent on oil and gas by the Liberals last year. It's $7 billion from Quebec. We don't want to pay for the $40 billion which have been spent by the Liberals on Trans Mountain. It's $9 billion from Quebec. Those are $16 billion of which not $1 has been spent in Quebec to develop a lot more power and wealth for Quebecers with our own money.
We need to let the leader of the Liberals respond.
Well, actually, I was going to pick up on the enormous opportunity that exists in Quebec, exists in Ontario, exists in the north of Canada, really exists across this great nation in terms of critical metals and minerals. We are have one of the biggest resources in this country. And it's not just an enormous economic opportunity, it is a strategic opportunity for Canada. So we have to make a decision, not just to develop it, but how do we develop it and who are our partners for it? Do we become more dependent on the United States, which is what they want? By the way, President Trump this week said he might put a tax on critical metals and minerals, just showing again.
Yeah, but
if I may, and so the discussions
to negotiate.
if I may
Let's
finish.
let him finish.
Let me finish. So the opportunity includes in Europe and includes in Asia as our partners. Last point. In order to get it done, we'll put in place a first and last mile fund. So these projects are connected to road and rail so they can go quickly to market. And we will have all of the other fast tracking measures in place that I talked about earlier in terms of capital, timing, approvals, so that we can move quickly, we can be stronger at home, better.
Always with the
Mr. Singh.
approval of
Yeah,
Quebec.
I think
Singh has the
Sure
floor.
about that.
we should absolutely take advantage of the fact that we've got incredible amounts of critical minerals in our country. And
I don't feel bad muting Jagmeet Singh right now. The debate is starting to slow down, but considering that Poilievre got all his punches in early, I think that's going to be the narrative coming out of it, that Carney got savaged.
to build on something Mr. Blanchet mentioned about the investments that this country has made. What I found very troubling is that the past number of years, the Liberal government record is one where we have spent the most subsidies compared to any other country in the G7 on subsidizing oil and gas. These are highly profitable companies.
You
I
voted
think that's
for
the
it.
wrong thing to do. We fought against it again and again.
No, you voted
And then
for
the
it.
Liberals have
Over
continued
and
to do
again.
it. And so my question really to Mr. Carney is, will you commit to ending oil and gas subsidies?
Yeah.
We should be using that to invest in people, not giving it to highly profitable oil and gas companies.
Yeah, we talked.
I promised Mr. Poilievre the next, we'll come back and get that question answered. Mr. Poilievre.
Well, Mr. Carney, you point out that Donald Trump has a wrong-headed idea of putting a tax on our mines and our industry. And that is wrong. But so do you. You want to apply a massive industrial carbon tax on Canadian mines, Canadian steel mills, Canadian aluminum plants,
You want to let this
Canadian oil and gas. And your idea is to double the tax that Trump is applying by hitting them a second time. This will do nothing for the environment. It will actually ship our jobs south of the border,
Mr. Poilievre's
just
plan is let them
like
pollute as much as they
President
want.
Trump
Not a good
wants. My plan is to bring
Singh will not stop talking. I have paused this debate less times than Singh has tried to interrupt Pierre Poilievre alone.
that production home here to Canada. For example, I will give a tax credit to low-emitting Canadian industry like Quebec's aluminum, for example, or British Columbia's natural gas, so that we not only bring home the production, but we do it below global average levels of emissions,
You
so that
translate
we
that.
actually help the environment while bringing
Wants to
home
let
the
big
jobs
polluters
for our
pollute
people
We
as
have,
they
to,
want.
we have to let him
at the
finish.
same time.
Please stop talking,
that
Jimmy.
is a sensible, pragmatic approach that puts us in charge of our economic destiny so we can stand up to the Americans from a position of strength for a change.
Mr.
wants to let
Carney,
them
we've
pollute
got,
as
hang
much
on a
as they
second.
want.
I want to give you a chance to speak to Mr. Singh's criticism about oil and gas subsidies and Mr. Poilievre's criticism about the industrial carbon tax.
Okay, I'm going to make 3 points. I'll make 4 if you want me to respond to that, but I want to make 3. The first is that I answered this question last night, but I think the puck had already dropped in the Canadians game, so not everyone heard it. Yes, end to oil and gas subsidies.
And that's why you need New Democrats. We'll make it.
Secondly, I would have done it independently. Secondly, recognizing that the biggest component of that was the cost of building Keystone, which is the pipeline which has helped to increase oil and gas export, or oil exports rather, by 50% in this country. That is an asset of the people of Canada. We own it. And the question of what to do it. So it's not a subsidy that has disappeared, it's actually an asset of Canada. I think the third point, though, in terms of where the oil and gas industry, particularly the oil industry, wants to and needs to go, which is to become low carbon in the production and transportation of oil. One of the big projects we need to move forward with is carbon capture and storage, the Pathways project, so that we have oil and gas that is competitive, not just today, 10 years from now and 20 years from now, as the world uses less. We want to have more market share. We need to do
Mr. Carney, by very
that. My government will move that.
But by definition, a subsidy isn't when we buy a pipeline. I'm talking about subsidies that go to oil and gas companies.
Well,
Independent, separate from the country, oil and gas companies. That's what I'm
the
talking
figure
about.
you quoted last night included the cost of the pipeline.
Do you want to
There's
address
billions
his
of
point?
dollars we're spending. We got to stop spending.
Sorry, can we get you to address his point about the industrial carbon
How
tax?
much will the industrial carbon tax add to the price of a car?
So the first thing I want to say is I'm going to address the broader point. Broader point.
He never gets to it. He always just rolls off the questions, talks about whatever he wants, which I guess technically is the right thing to do in a debate, but it's also very telling. My goodness, though, every time Mark Carney talks, it's like the orb of confusion has been turned on, and within 20 seconds, I don't even know where he started because he's just talking about boring nothingness. by like about the 10 or 15 second mark. He's just
Yes,
onto
the
nothing.
entire absence of a climate plan from Mr. Poilievre, which, by the way, is going to put our industry and our country at a disadvantage as we're looking for new trading partners. Guess what? Most people want to deepen our partnership in Europe, in Asia. Those countries care about whether or not you've made progress. Second thing is, we're designing a program so that the big polluters pay Canadians at home for making responsible climate choices, for retrofitting their home, getting their emissions down, or improving otherwise. And that is smart climate policy. It's better for the big polluters, and it's better for Canadians.
Chair Poilievre.
Mr. Carney didn't answer my question. I asked how much would an industrial carbon tax on Canadian steel add to the price of a car? He won't answer because he knows that it will be very expensive because there's lots of steel in cars. Now, well, Mr. Carney has temporarily
But you know the answer?
hidden the
You don't know
carbon
the answer
tax.
either. You're just
It's
throwing out random
thousands of
Just
dollars.
making it up, though. You don't
extra
know.
cost.
I do know the answer to that question.
When you add taxes to steel, you raise the price of everything that uses steel. When you add taxes
It's a straw man argument to say you know the price.
when you add the
Well, apparently now Poilievre needs to know the exact number. The whole point is, does the man who is putting in place the policy know? That is the bigger question. Poilievre doesn't need to know. He just needs to know it's a stupid idea from the fundamentals of what makes up the idea. Taxing industry is going to make everything industry is doing more expensive. Oh, you don't know how much it costs. Stop talking, Jimmy. Stop it.
carbon tax onto the price of, for example, fertilizer, you increase the price of food. So while Mr. Carney has temporarily hidden the Liberal carbon tax at the pumps while keeping the tax fully in law and planning to raise it after the election, he's also going after a tax on our industry that will ultimately be passed on to you. After a lost Liberal decade of rising costs, we cannot afford a fourth Liberal term. We need a new government that will fully axe the carbon tax, increase the jobs that we have here in Canada, and bring down your cost of living.
We've got just a little over 3 minutes left in this segment. So, Mr. Singh, I want to ask you, do you think climate change is still a priority from Canadians? You're out there. What are you hearing?
Absolutely. You speak to any young person and they think, no, we're seeing climate crisis in front of us happening right now. You speak to seniors who say, we used to be able to live in our homes without air conditioning, and now we're seeing heat crises in communities that never had worries about extreme weather. We're seeing flooding, we're seeing forest fires like never before. We are living in a climate crisis. So Canadians are absolutely worried about it. As soon as we come into a summer, we start seeing those forest fires again. It's top of mind for Canadians because they're living it, they're seeing it. And I want those Canadians to know, Mr. Carney is not going to end those fossil fuel subsidies unless I'm there to fight back. Mr. Poilievre wants to let big polluters pollute as much as they want, poison our beautiful land, our water, and air. He wants to let them dump into our oceans. I'm going to fight back and defend our...
Oh, Poilievre's also going to push your mother down the stairs and take away her pension. Jagmeet Singh is the biggest conspiracy theorist in politics because he basically just accuses everyone else of being like Scrooge McDuck, and they're going to screw you over for no reason.
Environment.
Monsieur Blanchet, on the issue of whether or not people still care about climate change.
I think people should be kept very informed about climate change because we are in a very strange denial situation about climate change, which still exists and is very expensive. And I'm sorry to crash your party, guys, but you are telling fairy tales. Clean oil and gas is a fairy tale. Large scale carbon sequestration, sorry, I'm French, is a fairy tale. It does not exist. If Alberta wanted to exploit oil and gas and it were not a matter of pollution, I wouldn't mind at all. That's their business. Our own powerhouse in terms of energy in Quebec is clean energy. We are the best place in the world to achieve that. Our market is the northeastern part, Democrat part of United States. We want to keep our money to create wealth in Quebec for Quebecers. Let us be different because we can afford
Monsieur
to be
Blanchet,
different.
let me give, I will get to you because I said I would, but you've taken a couple of hits here and I want to give you a chance to respond to some of the things that people on this side of the stage have said.
Thank you. Well, first of all, we do support protecting the environment. We want to ban the dumping of raw sewage into our waters. We want to hold large corporations to high environmental standards to protect our water and air. But we cannot do that by raising taxes and sending jobs overseas, as Mr. Carney is proposing to do. That has been the approach of the last 10 years of the Liberal government. What the biggest companies that develop our resources say is that we need to repeal the Liberal anti-development law C-69, a law Mr. Carney wants to keep in place. They say we need to repeal the industrial carbon tax and get rid of the Liberal energy cap. We need 6 months approvals in order to take back energy security and energy sovereignty.
We can summarize that. He wants to conclude as much as
Mr.
possible.
Carney, hang on. Last word to Mr.
independent
Carney in this segment, please.
Thank you very much. You know, I was born in Fort Smith.
Yeah, as much as we think Jagmeet Singh is super annoying, I guarantee all the left-wing outlets are going to talk about how much of a brave fighter he was during this debate.
In the Northwest Territories, just north of what the oil sands became. When I was born and when I was growing up in Edmonton, early days, it was a fairy tale, quote unquote. But you know what happened? Canadian ingenuity, Canadian engineers, Canadian governments, both the federal government and the Alberta government got together and converted this.
The worst pollution
If I may,
in the world.
if I may.
The worst pollution
may I
in
finish?
the
May I
world.
finish? May I?
10 more seconds to finish, please. Let him finish his point.
That's the opportunity we have. That's the opportunity we have in carbon capture. That's the opportunity we have in small modular reactors. That's the opportunity we have in hydrogen beyond. This country can be a clean energy superpower. My government will help deliver it.
And that is time for this segment. Gentlemen, let us go to our final theme, which is called Leading in a Crisis.
Oh my goodness. It's almost over, guys.
Canadians know how to weather a storm. Canadians know how to get through a difficult time.
If at the end of the day we end up with the balance of power, Quebec is safer than it could be in any other scenario.
Now is not a time for weakness. Now is the time to take back control.
Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves.
Okay, leading in a crisis is a pretty broad theme that allows us to explore many different avenues here. So let's get to it. Mr. Carney, you get the first question this time. We haven't balanced a budget in this country in 17 years, and 10 of those years were under your party. You have pledged to get us to a balanced budget in 3 years. Question is, how?
So let me put this in the context of leading in a crisis, which is in a crisis, you got to plan for the worst. Worst is that the U.S. actually does want to take us over. Secondly, you got to have a plan to build, and that'll include a fiscal plan, and I will get to that in a second. The third thing is you need to respond in a crisis with overwhelming force. You need to think big. You need to move rapidly. The things we've been discussing today are a subset of what we can and should do as a nation, and we can deliver. And government can play a role, but its role has to be catalytic. And so our approach is that we will slow the rate of spending. It's been growing at 9% a year, operational spending, program spending, away from transfers, individual, 9% a year. We'll slow that to 2%. We will focus on a small amount of capital spending by the federal government in order to drive enormous private investment up to $500 billion by 5 years.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Ukraine surely constitutes a crisis. Leading in a time of crisis, Mr. Poilievre, question for you. If the United States withholds support from Ukraine going forward, do you believe Canada should commit more to assist?
I believe we should continue to support Ukraine. Our party supported donating missiles that the Canadian military was decommissioning. We supported funds and other armaments to back the Ukrainians in the defense of their sovereignty. We also need to rebuild our own Canadian military because the Russians want to make incursions into our waters. We'll be buying 4 massive Arctic icebreakers. I'll be opening the first Arctic base since the Cold War in Canada, CFB Iqaluit. We're going to double the size of the Arctic Rangers and fill the vacancies in our Canadian armed forces. We need a change to rebuild our military, which has been so disintegrated under the cuts and the mismanagement of the last 10 years. But we can have a change because we have the best soldiers, sailors, and airmen in the world, and they will have full backing from my government if you give me the honor of becoming Prime Minister.
I may come back to that one in the...
I know a lot of people really don't like the funding of Ukraine. The thing with the Ukraine funding that's extremely stupid from my perspective, although I support Ukraine, is the fact that we just send them money. Like we buy drones from China to send to Ukraine, which makes no sense at all. We're paying a Russian ally cash to then make something in their country, stimulating the Chinese economy so they can send it to Ukrainians. It's ridiculous why we even send anything to Ukraine when it's all counterproductive and it's absolutely destroying our economy to have like billions of dollars leaving every year. That's what makes our Ukraine funding so stupid. Poilievre's idea is like, hey, how about we just give them the things we are about to throw out anyways?
The open forum,
Thank
because
you.
I'm not sure we got an answer about Ukraine on that one, but okay.
Wait, what the heck?
Going
He
on.
totally
Mr.
answered it.
Blanchet.
Sure, the answer was yes.
We'll get more details perhaps as we go forward.
What was
Mr.
that?
Blanchet, given the U.S. trade war, should any talk of a referendum on Quebec independence be put on pause?
That one is easy. It will happen only after the negotiation is over, and that's a good thing. I want to say I support the idea. We must help Ukraine, but we also must help the civilians of Gaza, and we must destroy Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. You know what? I don't want to be the leader of Canada. You will understand that. I don't want to be prime minister, but I can offer to be a partner, a responsible partner, a collaborative partner. If Quebec is respected in its differences, in its aluminum industry and lumberwood industry and culture and French language and values of secularity of the state, which is the price to be paid in order to have real equality, then if we are respected, we will be a partner, and then even Canada will be stronger in its negotiation against Donald Trump. This is what I am offering. Respect us.
Mr. Singh, I watched last night's debate. You seemed very eager to talk about healthcare, so let's talk a little more healthcare right now. You have made many promises on healthcare. If a province says to you, we'll take your money for healthcare, but not your conditions on how to spend it, what do you do?
We've got to negotiate. We can't be giving away money without clear conditions.
Oh, so if UNRWA is just giving money to Hamas, what will you do about it if they say we're going to take your money, but we're going to give it to whoever we want, including Hamas? And then Singh says, "I'm going to negotiate." It's like, dude, that doesn't mean anything.
We're in a healthcare crisis right now, and a crisis that is hurting people across this country. People are waiting desperately in line in emergency rooms for hours and hours. Seniors are waiting for years and years to get the care that they need for surgeries that would remove pain or help them deal with mobility issues. We're in a serious crisis. Healthcare workers are burnt out. They are overstretched. And what we're seeing is more and more privatization, and that is hurting our public universal healthcare system. So we've got to fight back against it. We cannot allow our public money to go to a for-profit private clinic lining the pockets of a rich CEO or investors instead of going towards care. We need to make sure that we are investing in solutions where care gets to people, not profiting those at the very top. And so that's my commitment. I'm going to fight to make sure we defend our healthcare against the threats of Americanization and private.
By the way, breaking news, guys, they are canceling the leader questions after the debate. They were starting to try and kick Ezra Van and Rebel News people out of the media side of the debate, and now they just don't want to have questions because of how badly Mark Carney's performing is probably what the whole excuse making is in order to try and do.
Okay, we now go to open forum debate, and perhaps, Mr. Poilievre, you get the first word here. This might be a good time to put a little more flesh on the bone of what you think Canada could do for Ukraine if the U.S. backs out.
Yes, and my answer is that we should continue to support Ukraine. We don't need to follow the Americans in everything they do. When they're wrong, then we will stand on our own and with other allies. And with respect to Ukraine, that of course includes support with intelligence, equipment, armaments, but it also includes defunding Putin. Right now, Vladimir Putin has a monopoly on the European energy market because, frankly, the Liberals blocked exports of Canadian natural gas off the Atlantic coast. They blocked multiple projects. I would rapidly approve those projects on national security grounds so that we can actually ship Canadian natural gas over to Europe, break European dependence on Putin, defund the war, and turn dollars for dictators back into paychecks for our people.
Mr. Carney, you wanted to add?
Well, I want to go to the situation in Ukraine because it's very important. We've been a steadfast, Canada has been a steadfast ally, and Canadians have stepped up welcoming Ukrainians into their homes and supporting them in other ways. In my first month as Prime Minister, we joined the coalition of the willing to support Ukraine as the U.S. stepped back. So led by France, the United Kingdom, with Ukraine number European nations, Australia, ourselves, New Zealand.
By the way, the U.S. didn't step back.
To be Canada participating in these areas and helping. It also means open trade. Mr. Poilievre voted against free trade agreement with Ukraine. It means aid for Ukraine. Mr. Poilievre wants to cut foreign aid, including for Ukraine, or not. He didn't mention support for aid for Ukraine. We have to stand by them. We have to be there, and this government has been.
Mr. Singh.
New Democrats absolutely support standing with Ukraine and will continue to do that. But I appreciate the opportunity in talking about leadership in crisis, talk about many of the crises that we're up against. And one of the crises we're up against in our country with the threat of Donald Trump, with the threat of the trade war, and with the privatization and Americanization of our healthcare system is the healthcare system. And what we have learned today, Mr. Carney mentioned slowing operation spending. That's a cut to services. He said his plan. He has a plan to balance the operating budget within 3 years. That's going to require massive cuts to spending. We calculated that at $43 billion in cuts. In fact, Rosemary Barton, when he was on the show on February 16th, he said he would cut spending. He said it would be in operations. He defined it as transfers in health. And finally, longtime Liberal and former House Leader Karina Gould said that Mr. Carney's plans would mean massive cuts. That's the only way to achieve it. So, Mr. Carney, do you think it is leadership to cut health care at a time when it is in crisis? I think it is wrong. We can't do that.
We will not cut transfers for healthcare. We will not cut healthcare spending, full stop.
But
We'll
Mr.
have
Carney,
a detail, if I may.
Who do we believe, Mr. Carney today, or the one he spoke on Rosemary Barton's show on February 16th?
I did not.
The one that repeated again that he would cut spending? Who do we believe?
If I may, consistently said we'll preserve all transfers to the provinces, including the increases. We will preserve all the transfers to individuals, I won't detail them all, but there. So we're looking at addressing an operational spend, which is about $150 billion. We will address that. We will make it more efficient, and we will do it in 3 years, and we'll balance that budget.
Mr. Blanchet.
I am 6 minutes behind Mr. Carney, so I will speak a little bit longer. First, I will support any initiative which will bring Canada aligned with Europe and NATO in order to be stronger and facing new threats.
Good.
I believe that 2% won't be enough. I'm not more in favor of war than anybody else, but we have responsibilities, and our main ally is removing himself from the stage. So we have to step up. We have to do our part. I want to go somewhere else entirely, however. I want to ask Mr. Carney, if we're speaking about leadership here, if Quebec and Canada were to say, you are not being given a majority government, there will be more conservatives than you would like, maybe more New Democrats than you would like, and more people from the bloc than you would like. Will you accept, because you don't seem to be very eager about that, to deal with people which basically are more experienced than you are, as legitimate as you are, and would be more representative altogether than you would be being alone in your little kingdom? And I want also to propose to you all guys that 1 week after the election, we all meet, whatever the result, and we start dealing with this crisis together, because this is what people, either they are from Alberta or Quebec or wherever, this is what people expect from us.
Mr. Carney, is that something you could get behind?
I look forward to meeting with everyone. You're welcome to come, Steve, if you'd like. Week after crisis, but also, but in all seriousness,
that's not very respectful.
No, but I'll
That's
come.
not very respectful.
Honestly, we have just gotten into the dull stage of the debate where people are just nattering at each other.
I'm coming. On peut jaser un peu. Okay, I come to the.
On jase.
Yeah. Okay. I'll come to the core. Look, in a crisis, yes, you need a team, and you need to bring the country along with you. So what I did in the first week was to bring the premiers together, meet with all the Indigenous leaders, and move forward in that context. Now the question is, who's going to lead out of this? Whoever leads out of this, if I may, Mr. Blanchet, Merci. Thank you. Whoever's going to lead out of this is going to need to work with all the provinces, work with labor, work with Indigenous leaders, work with all Canadians to bring them forward in a united front. And if I'll make this last point, one of the things that has happened, which is a credit to those people at home, is that Canadians are coming together. And it's our responsibility to meet the strength of Canadian unity.
Still lagging. I have one small point to make. Yeah. You will be elected, if you are elected in the parliament where there are other leaders. I don't know if he...
Oh, people are asking about the volume. This is as loud as the debate can get because this is the volume of the CPAC stream.
He called you, or Mr. Poilievre, I don't know if he called you, but before yesterday, you have not spoken to me once, even if I proposed it so many times. But you say, I speak to provinces' leaders. You're not elected in provinces. You are in a parliament where people are to make decisions which might not always suit you. But this is democracy,
Blanchet, I'm
which
going to
you
jump
don't
in.
know too much about.
I'm going to jump in here because I'm noticing what the clock is saying, and you brought up Gaza earlier, and I think our audience would be interested in hearing your views on the other major international crisis.
Honestly, I don't care. At the same time, this is probably a great opportunity for Pierre Poilievre to drag everyone on this issue because everyone is so flipping radical on this.
Facing the
I just
world
want to
right
get
now.
this, before we get that, just to finish up on the healthcare, I just want to speak to healthcare workers right now who are deeply worried about the status of our healthcare system, to Canadians who believe and love our universal public healthcare system, to patients who are stressed out. If you're worried about which Mr. Carney to believe, the one today or the one who spoke on 3B shows and said he would cut, vote for New Democrats, and we will fight to defend our healthcare.
I think your
we will never
supporters
let
would really
anyone
like
cut
to
it.
hear what you have to say about this question, and we have less than 5 minutes for it here. What role should Canada play in the other major international crisis in this world, in the Middle East and the war in Gaza? Pierre Poilievre, would you start us off on that? What role can Canada play?
Well, first of all, we must condemn Hamas, and more importantly, the terror sponsors in Tehran who initiated the attacks, the horrific attacks of October 7th. We need to defeat the terrorists so that all the peoples of the world can live in peace and defend the right of, yes, Palestinians to have their own lives free from the oppression of Hamas dictators and Iranian intervention, while Israel has the ability to live in freedom and peace. But I also want to say, we need to get back to the Canadian tradition, which is that when people come to this country, they leave foreign conflicts behind. The rampaging riots targeting Jewish communities is utterly unacceptable, and it points to the growing chaos that we see on our streets after 10 years of incredibly irresponsible liberal policies of weak borders, of dividing people into groups, of saying one thing to one group and the opposite to another, dividing and conquering. We must end that division and unite our people so that everyone feels safe, and that when we come here, we put our foreign conflicts behind and we put Canada
first.
Mr. Singh,
come
please,
from countries from around the world, and they care deeply about where they come from, and they should be able to do so. That's a part of being in our country, to have that freedom. Your treatment of Palestinians.
Just just say that you want Khalistan. Just say it. Come on.
Has been frankly disgusting. Your treatment of people who provide care and service for people in Gaza has been disgusting. On top of that, people in Israel and in Palestine deserve to live in peace and security. And Mr. Carney, to date, you've not acknowledged that what's going on in Gaza is now clearly become a genocide. It's important to call things out as they are, and you've not done that.
Mr. Carney.
We need to work, to go to your question, we need to work with our international partners, maximum pressure, maximum encouragement for an immediate ceasefire. That's the first thing. Encourage the return of all of the hostages, resumption of humanitarian aid. My government put in place $100 million of humanitarian aid, which is ready to go. With respect to where this ultimately goes, yes, two-state solution, but it has to be a viable and free Palestinian state, living side by side in peace and security with the state of Israel. I will underscore one other thing. Mr. Poilievre rightly mentioned Iran, the Iranian sponsors in this region. We have to be clear-eyed about the fundamental risks of Iran and do everything with our international partners to check it and turn it.
Mr. Blanchet.
If we are to work together, we will have to be consistent. The Jewish community in Quebec and Canada is harassed by a very little minority of radical Islamists. and we don't do so.
I give Blanchet a lot of credit for actually using the term radical Islamists. So many people are just like, oh, they're being attacked by people. Like, no, it's Islamists.
So much. The law in Canada says that somebody may invite people to be violent, to propose genocide against another people if they can be hidden behind a religious motivation. They are in agreement with that. They are in agreement with that. They are in agreement with that. And we say it is a crime to invite people to violence and killing other people. And this is what is being done very often in Canada, in Quebec, with the approval of the Criminal Code of Canada. And we are saying this has to be changed. We have to change what we do before we want people elsewhere to change what they do.
Last minute in this segment, Mr. Poilievre.
This is about crises and leadership. And one crisis we have is in immigration. Because of this Liberal government's commitment to a radical policy called the Century Initiative, which seeks to bring our population up to 100 million people, they have allowed massive overcrowding in our communities. That has caused housing shortages, job shortages,
Don't blame immigration
and
for the fault of your government.
And if I could,
the fact that you did not
I
invest
didn't
in
interrupt
housing,
you. I did
built
not
6
interrupt you,
homes.
sir. I did
That's
not
wrong.
interrupt you.
Don't
It is-
blame.
I do not blame.
your
If I
failure.
could,
Let him finish.
I do not blame immigrants. I blame the Liberal government, which brought this policy on. And Mr. Carney wants to continue with the Century Initiative. This is crazy. We have to get back to normal levels of immigration, get rid of the fraud in the temporary immigration system, and ensure that the people who come here can arrive in numbers that we can house, employ, and care for. That's how it always was, and that's how we're going to restore
Thank
it.
you, Mr.
That's generally a good statement on immigration. I would still love it if the Conservatives would embrace my policy of instead of 200 to 250,000 new PRs per year, they would go to just 100,000, and then I would like to see temporary foreign workers and students slashed by like 2/3.
Poilievre. That is our time for this segment. Those are our 5 themes, but we are not done yet. We
Oh,
are
no.
entering the next section of our debate tonight, what we're calling the leader's choice, something a little bit different. Each of you
Guys, you have to forgive me for a second here. I need to go to the bathroom, so I'm just going to let this play for a bit while I exit the room.
will get the chance to ask a question, any question, of any other leader. You can then debate the answer, and each one-on-one will last for 3 minutes. So, Mr. Singh, you have the first option here. Who do you want to ask your question of?
Mr. Carney.
Go for it.
Mr. Carney, as chair of Brookfield Investments, your company is one of the biggest tax dodgers in Canada. As chair, you approved decisions where Brookfield Investments bought up affordable homes, kicked out the tenants, and jacked up the rates. As prime minister, one of the first things you did was a tax cut that helped out mostly millionaires. And you have a plan to cut services for people. Now, I expect that of Mr. Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. That's very much a conservative plan. But my concern is that doesn't sound like what people want for a Liberal leader. So my question to you is, Mr. Carney, whose side are you really on?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question, Mr. Singh. I'm on the side of Canadians. I'm in this for Canadians. I work for Canadians.
But your track record doesn't show that, though.
No, I have a track record of public service for this country. Go back to something Mr. Blanchet referenced earlier, which is have I resolved any crises? We're in Quebec. If you ask anyone in the finance industry, if you ask anyone in government in Quebec in 2008, they'll know that I resolved the biggest crisis in Quebec. Yeah,
You won't have fun.
But
60 million.
But
of
may
dollars.
I'm
This
in
is for
fairness
these two only.
with Mr.
This is for
Singh.
these two.
Mr. Singh. Yes, I have had a long career in the private sector. I'm proud of that career. I've always acted with integrity, and it brings me with experience that I can apply
No one's
in this
questioning your
moment,
integrity,
in moment
sir.
of crisis.
And you certainly have served the country. But the problem is who have you served? You've served to benefit those at the very top. You jacked up the price of homes for people living in affordable homes as a strategic.
It's such a weird thing for him to say. I'm not questioning your integrity. I'm just questioning your integrity. But you should question Carney's integrity. He doesn't have any.
Decision, you dodge taxes, and then your decisions as prime minister show you're not prioritizing people, but you're prioritizing big business, billionaires.
So what have we done as a government directly? So we've gone directly to workers using all of our proceeds from the tariffs, committing all of them for workers, the workers most affected in
The
industries.
employment insurance isn't high enough.
Unlike others who
But the amount,
plan
though,
to
let's talk about
use them to cut taxes. We are
the amount
focused
of
on.
EI is not high enough, though. You have to accept that. Right now,
There will be additional programs. I am fully confident that the next government, whatever government is formed, or certainly if I'm in the next government, we will make additional programs.
But you didn't do that
for
so
those
far,
workers.
though.
Well, I can't.
You couldn't.
You couldn't, given that we're in an election
You
process.
could have increased the amount, though.
May I make a core point here, if I may, which is that when you think about workers here today and people watching at home, particularly younger people, there is an enormous opportunity in the trades, in the skilled trades. We are going to build this country in a way that has not been seen before. We are literally talking about hundreds of thousands, not jobs, but careers
But I
in
think
the
people are
trade.
worried, Mr.
And
Carney,
that's
that-
why we're investing in apprenticeships and mid-career.
But I think people are worried, Mr. Carney, if New Democrats aren't there to force liberals to make sure they remember about people they will forget.
Gentlemen, that is time. Thank you for that. Monsieur Blanchet, you have the next question. To whom would you like to put it?
Mr. Carney, you avoided quite I would say, skillfully the questions of Mr. Singh. But first, let me correct something. In 2008, not so much by your decision, $10 billion were given to car industry in Ontario, while 60 millions, not billions of dollars, were lent to lumberwood throughout the whole of Canada. I don't believe that's the right way to manage a crisis, since you did not recoup the money from the car industry. Then, you have been the manager of Brookfield. It's supposed to be a green investment fund, but we now know that 50% of the investments of Brookfield is in fossil fuel. It's not so green. You seem to want to support oil and gas industry. That's interesting. You want to support prefab housing, and it's also in the investments of Brookfield, but not in Canada. You want to support nuclear power, smaller reactors, which are more dangerous, by the way. And Brookfield has investments in Westinghouse.
That isn't even really much of a question. He's just destroying Mark Carney without even asking anything.
You have hidden the money of Brookfield in Bermuda and Cayman Island, $30 billion. Billions of dollars lost for Canada. You are having your taxes being paid by families, workers, elders in Canada and Quebec instead of paying your own taxes. So I want to know, will you, before the election, reveal all the details of your assets, as Mr. Singh has done, as Mr. Poilievre has done, and as I have done? We have a right to know
let him answer.
under those circumstances.
Let's let him answer.
Well, the first thing is I want to say a word about. I'll say a word about Brookfield. This is a Canadian success story. It is the largest infrastructure investor and developer in the world. It is one of the largest, if not the largest, developer of renewable power in the world. And who benefits from that? That's Canadian pensioners. That's Quebec pensioners. That is teachers. That firefighters. It is a series of people, including individuals on this stage, benefit from that. Now, always acted with integrity. Served the shareholders of Brookfield when I was there.
This is literally just a filibuster to try and run out the clock.
I have left that. I have followed all the rules well in advance.
So
I have followed all the rules well in advance.
Let's reveal your assets like we all did.
And working for the people of Canada.
What do you own? Why don't you tell
gentlemen.
Canadians and
That is
Quebecers
time.
what you own?
Monsieur Blanchet, we're moving on to Mr. Poilievre now, who has his opportunity to ask the question of whomever he'd like here, and that will be?
Mr. Carney. But if I could
Look him up.
begin by setting the stage. The choice in this election is, after a lost Liberal decade of rising cost and crime and a falling economy under America's thumb, do we want to elect them to a fourth term? Or Do we want to change? Change so that you can afford food and homes. Change so that you can be safe on your street and your change so that your paycheck grows fast.
Dude, Carney wants to do anything but look over at Trudeau. He's looked at the left side of the, he's looked to his left, he's looked down, he's fiddling with his papers. He does not want to look at Poilievre at all because the man is pathetic. This guy's going to negotiate with Trump. He can't even look Poilievre in the eyes.
Faster than your cost of living. Change with a new Conservative government. Because Mr. Carney has not changed. Mr. Carney, in 2020, it was recorded, you began advising Justin Trudeau. It's still on the Liberal Party website today that you are Justin Trudeau's economic advisor. They might want to update your website on that. On June 3rd of 2021, you said that inflation would be a sign of economic progress. And you advised governments, including Justin Trudeau's, your Liberal government, to print money, which led to the worst inflation crisis in a generation. Now, that means that mothers went to bed with empty fridges and empty bank accounts, worried how they'd feed their kids, that seniors worried they'd be evicted from their homes, that young people believed they'd never be able to own a home in the first place. Now, in retrospect, you look back on the Liberal decisions that you advised Justin Trudeau to take. Will you look to the camera in the eye and apologize to the many?
He's actually so pissed looking. Look how mad Mark Carney looks. He's just like adjusting himself, like he's wondering when the guards are going to show up to execute Poilievre.
People who suffered as a result.
Like, look, he has like the face of like a disappointed lizard.
Of the inflationary policies that you advised Justin Trudeau to implement.
You know, it's.
He's like this.
I said earlier, but I'm going to say it again. I know you want to be running against Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau isn't here.
Are you denying
I
you
am
were his
here.
economic advisor?
I did not provide any of that advice. I did not provide any of that
It's
advice.
on the Liberal Party
I'm
website.
sorry. Well,
Are you accusing your Liberal Party of lying about your role? Because it says today you can go to the Liberal Party website now, and it says that you were Justin Trudeau's economic advisor.
The way you judge someone, in my view, is how they act, what they do when they have responsibility. Twice I was a central bank governor, and in both cases, if I may, in both cases when I was responsible for inflation, inflation was less than 2%. I'll add that when I was here responsible for the Bank of Canada, inflation was less than 2%. Our dollar was at parity. That is the kind of success that I can deliver for this country coming out of this crisis. And what is at stake here? What is at stake here? What is at stake here?
That gave us the worst inflation that we have had in a generation, because the policies that you implemented and those of the MPs that are still in your ministry.
To the
fellow Canadians,
crisis which
the last 10 years has been about the Liberals. The next 10 years should be about you.
And that's time. Mr. Carney.
Yeah.
Good news is the next question is yours.
I'm going to ask myself a question. Actually, I'm going to ask a question which has been troubling me. And it's troubling me because, you know, we are in a...
You can tell he's so thrown off balance. This is something that he's probably scripted out that he wants to ask because they knew the segment was coming up and he's already like 6 ums down on the field.
A very dangerous and divided world.
Who is it to?
I'm going to ask a question, Mr. Poilievre. Why not? We're in a dangerous and divided world. We talked earlier about the challenges in the Middle East, the threats from Iran, threats from Russia, Russia's aggression in Ukraine. We have the threats from China, which I raised. We have the United States, which is fundamentally changing its security relationships, its commercial relationships. We have all this. And in the context of that, everyone on this stage, Mr. Blanchet, Mr. Singh, myself, we have our top secret security clearance. We have our top secret security clearance. I got mine within 3 weeks. It wasn't hard, but I felt it was important that I had it so I could be in a position to be informed about that dangerous world and take decisions at. And Mr. Poilievre, it is now 950 days, if my numbers are right, since you've had the opportunity to get your top secret security clearance and you've refused. Why?
This is such a pathetic talking point because this talking point only works when Poilievre can't respond. he's going to be able to respond and say, I didn't get it because if I took it, I wouldn't have been able to talk about the thing I was getting it for. I wouldn't be able to talk about the Nisikoff report.
Well, first of all, I have got my security clearance when I was a minister. I got top secret clearance at the time, so there's no problem getting that. But when the government made this recent offer, they said that if I got the secret security clearance briefings, that I would be gagged under the security law, and I could be prosecuted if I spoke freely about matters of foreign interference. Now, given that Canada has experienced Chinese interference by Beijing, the government of China, in 2 consecutive elections, I needed to do my job to speak freely without fear of prosecution. And that was not something I would be allowed to do. Even Thomas Mulcair, the former leader of the NDP, said that when he was the leader of the opposition, he never would have accepted the kind of gag order that your government and Mr. Trudeau's government was attempting to impose on me. And it's good that I'd made that decision, because it has allowed me to speak freely about things like the case where one of your candidates, sir.
Oh my goodness, why would Carney bring this issue up? He gets to pivot to Joe Tay and Paul Chang.
Said that he wanted to send a political opponent to China under a bounty threatening his life or imprisonment, and you refused to get rid of him. Now, it might have something to do with the fact that you went to China not long ago to get a $250 million loan for your company. But the reality is you refused to stand up for a Canadian who was being threatened by a foreign government. And I was able to speak freely on that matter because I refused the gag order that the Liberal government attempted to impose on me.
Well, there's a couple of interesting things. I think people at home have seen a robust debate here, and it's been a robust campaign. And
what the heck? What is he going to tell people to go tip their waiters after? What is going on? Well, this was very interesting. I might have a few things to say about that. He's so bad at this. Guys, I was never exaggerating over time saying this man is going to suck at the debates because he cannot handle journalists asking him slightly unfriendly questions. It was always true. This guy sucks at this so badly. He is terrible. He doesn't know how to actually pivot off things correctly. He is so smug, and he is so used to the media cleaning up after him that when he can't cut somebody off and cut them out of context, he gets absolutely bodied like this. And now he's filibustering again.
it has not stopped Mr. Blanchet or Mr. Singh at times during his campaign by making challenges with respect to these issues. So one can address it. I will observe, as someone with the top secret security clearance, that China is not the only country that is accused of foreign interference. And
gentlemen, that is time
we'll
for the segment. That's our time. Now, closing statements are still a few minutes down the road, so we have a little bit of time for some quick hit Q&As for each of you right now. Short questions, 45 seconds, please, on the answers, and we're going to go left to right as I look at you right now. Mr. Poilievre, you get the first question. To the best of my knowledge, you have not offered a hard timeline, as the other parties have, to meet Canada's NATO commitment of 2% spending on defense. When would you hit that target?
My aim will be to 2030. That said, when we renegotiate our trade deal with the U.S., I know it's their priority to see us increase our military budget. One of the things I will say to the Americans is the more free trade, tariff-free free trade we have, the faster we can rebuild our military in Canada and reassert our sovereignty. And we will use that money to have heavy icebreakers in the north, Poseidon aircraft, fighter jets, a new base in the north, double the Arctic Rangers, fill the vacancies in the armed forces, and rebuild the warrior spirit that characterized our military since the birth of our country. We will rebuild our forces, and we will stand behind our veterans.
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre. Mr. Carney, your question. You have cut both the consumer carbon tax and the capital gains tax increase that you inherited from your predecessor. Is that an admission that the Liberals made life less affordable for Canadians?
I think let me give you the rationale behind both of those changes. First, with respect to the consumer carbon tax, in effect, it'd become too divisive for Canadians. Canadians received rebates. On the whole, they received more than the tax actually was, but some had represented that it was a tax without a rebate. It became divisive. It didn't serve its purpose. It made a relatively modest contribution to overall climate goals. I got rid of it. First act made Canadians whole. Secondly, but with respect to the capital gains tax, it's come up again. I'll be quick. This is a fundamental issue. We need to build this country. Builders, innovators, entrepreneurs need to be rewarded. That's why I brought it back.
And that's time. Thank you. Mr. Singh, would you change the existing cap on immigration?
I've said that the level of immigration, first of all, we need immigration. It's fundamentally important to our country. And we speak to any small business owner, you speak to people here in Quebec.
I should just take votes on whether or not we even let Jagmeet Singh speak past this point.
You speak to farmers. It's fundamentally important. A couple of things, though, we know we need to be able to set the amount of folks that we welcome to our country at a level that it meets our needs. So I would ensure that we've got an expert panel that makes that determination based on our economic needs. We also know that we should be very clear that the lack of investment from Liberals and Conservatives resulted in the fact that we have a shortage in housing. That's something that we've got to fix. I should also point out that if you are worried about the cuts being proposed by Liberals and Conservatives, vote for New Democrats. We'll fight back to protect Canadians and make sure that we've got the right immigration levels.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. That's time. Mr. Blanchet, Quebec, I believe, is now the only province with a carbon tax. Do you think that's fair?
It's not entirely true. It's not a tax. What Quebec has is a system by which we invite big emission companies, I don't know how to translate that, to reduce their emissions. If they do not, then they have to pay. It goes into a fund which is invested then in reducing emissions. Our partner is California, which makes this a huge deal about reducing emissions. This is what we do. This is to be compared to what Europe does. And by the way, Europe would impose tariffs on Canadian oil if it ever got there. We're quite proud of that. And we have to be responsible because this is much less expensive than doing nothing to fight climate.
That's time. We're going to do another set of quick hits here, left to right again, and 30 seconds this time. Monsieur Poilievre, you've previously promised to defund the CBC as one of your very first acts as Prime Minister. Is that still the plan?
Yes, CBC will continue to operate as a self-funded, Canadian-owned and controlled non-for-profit that raises money like other media organizations through sponsorships, subscriptions, advertising, licensing fees, and countless other things that will ensure Canadians who still want to listen and view its content will be able to do so. And at the same time, we'll allow freedom of the press so that everybody has their voice heard and they can make their own decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. The next question to you, 30 seconds. Would you remove some of Canada's legal tax avoidance loopholes that companies that you have worked for have used?
Look, I think that what we need to do is
By the way, guys, right now, Mark Carney is taking the lead in Google Trends, but not for good reason. He took the lead about 20 minutes ago, back when in real time, Blanchet was absolutely destroying him on all of the Brookfield asset scandals.
undertake a comprehensive review of our corporate tax system and do that on the basis of the right principles. We've got to have fairness, transparency, sustainability, and competitiveness. So we need a tax system, a corporate tax system, including being part of a international minimum corporate tax through the OECD.
And that is time. Mr. Singh, the question for you is, if you hold the balance of power after this election is over, what would your price be to support another party?
We've laid out our priorities. We want to make sure we bring down the cost of groceries, build homes that people can afford. I can also tell you that we would defend CBC, unlike Mr. Poilievre, who wants to cut it. And we would close tax loopholes and offshore tax havens, even though Mr. Carney didn't respond to that. And selling stocks and shares to make profits and then having less taxes on that is not hard work. And so those aren't the job creators. The people who are job creators are the hardworking men and women that contribute to our economy.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Monsieur Blanchet, kind of the same question. If you hold the balance of power in the next minority parliament, if it is that, what would be the price of your support?
Respect for Quebec. That's quite easy. I don't want to go against what Canada wants to do for itself, but I don't want Canada to impose an economic vision or a multiculturalist vision on Quebec, which is different in terms of language and values and secularity and equality between people. So I want to be a partner And if Quebec is respected, Canada has nothing to fear from the Bloc because we vote for what is good for Quebec. It only has to be good for Quebec.
Thank you, Monsieur Blanchet. Now, we have one last question for each of you. We'll go right to left this time as I look at you. Bit of an offbeat question. Monsieur Blanchet, what is your biggest regret during this campaign?
That's a very good question. I'm not very fond of regrets, I would say, but we should have started sooner to see that we had to create the environment for a deal in which Quebec and Canada would be, one bigger than the other, but partners to be stronger in front of Mr. Trump and showing that maybe nobody here is the partner to let go alone without being surveyed or controlled or supervised by a Quebec voice.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchet. Same question, Mr. Singh. Your biggest regret of this campaign?
Not being able to meet as many people as I would love to have. It's
Because he needs to meet more people in his own home riding because they are not voting for him.
a short campaign, and so I can't get to as many communities that I wanted to. I think one of the honors of my job is to be able to meet people and to hear their stories, and then to take their stories and concerns and bring them to Ottawa and to fight for those people. And so I want you to know, even if I haven't made it to your community, I'm going to fight like hell to make sure that you're represented, that we never let any government cut our healthcare, that we defend the values that we care so deeply about. We make my life more affordable. That's my commitment to you. Even if I didn't get to see you, that's my commitment.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Mr. Carney, same question. Biggest regret of the campaign?
I'm to be honest, it's the same answer. This is an astonishing country. It is an amazing country. And the opportunity and the responsibility that comes with it of being with Canadians, hearing their stories, their challenges, drawing strength and ideas from them, and working to be part of the solution is the greatest honor of my life. But the regret is that it is also a big country, and it is a short period of time.
Mr. Poilievre, last word to you.
I honestly hate questions like this. Say something. We're gonna say, tell us something bad about yourself, but somehow turn it into a good thing. It's just stupid.
I actually agree with these two gentlemen. I had a rule that at all my rallies, even when they're really big, I would stand in front of a flag and greet every single person and hear their stories and learn their struggles. And that was always touching to me, that they would put their faith in me or in any of us.
Yeah.
But we've been in such a rush because we have to get off to the next event, so we haven't been able to stop and do that. And I want you to know out there, I haven't forgot about you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre. It is
Good answer for that question. I still just hate those type of questions.
time now for closing statements, and prior to the debate, you drew lots as to which order we would go in, and Mr. Singh, you get the first word on a closing statement.
Unfortunately, because I want to do a debate review as a standalone video later, I'm going to have to listen to Jagmeet Singh.
Really, thank you. Because you voted for New Democrats, we were able to build this country that we love.
No, we didn't.
Universal health care and pensions, because you voted for us. Because you voted for New Democrats, we were able to fight to bring in dental care, pharmacare, and childcare. Because you voted for us, because you supported us.
We didn't.
You have the power with your vote to send more New Democrats to Ottawa, to continue that fight, to make sure that no government cuts the things that we hold dear, like our health care, to ensure that we can do everything possible to make life more affordable by making it more affordable to buy your groceries and to get a home. I'm asking for your support in this election so that I can continue to fight to defend the things that make Canada, Canada, the things that we hold dear, the things that make us proud to be Canadian.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Mr. Carney.
We are facing the biggest crisis of our lifetimes. Donald Trump is trying to fundamentally change the world economy, the trading system. But really what he's trying to do to Canada, he's trying to break us so the US can own us. They want our land, they want our resources, they want our water, they want our country. And we're all going to stand up against Donald Trump. I'm ready. I've managed crises over the years. I've built strong economies. We will fight back with counter tariffs. We will protect our workers and those businesses, and we will build the strongest economy. We will build Canada strong. I'm asking for your support, the honor of doing so. Thank you.
The most 5 out of 10 statement I've ever heard. That's all that Carney is. He is a 5 out of 10 walking on 2 legs.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Monsieur Blanchet.
For 260 years and a little bit more, les Français devenus des Canadiens, devenus des Canadiens français, devenus des Québécois. You have tried to have them become Canadians like all Canadians. But to no avail, we are different. So let's be economic partners. Let's have a voice chosen by and for Quebecers, an ally for Canadians as equals in front of Mr. Trump.
Monsieur Poiliev.
Only in Canada could someone start where I began and get to this stage. I was born to a single mother and adopted by school teachers who raised me to believe in the incredible Canadian promise that anyone who worked hard could do anything. That promise feels broken today. Many of you worried about paying your bills, feeding your families, or ever even owning a home. You're worried your kids are in danger. But I'm here to say it doesn't have to be this way. With change, we can restore the Canadian promise so that hard work gets you a beautiful house on a safe street under a proud flag. We can do it with hope for a change.
Gentlemen, thank you for a very spirited debate tonight.
So yeah, Mark Carney lost. I think that's what we can conclude pretty early on. Yeah, that was terrible. Way better than the French debate. And I think it absolutely was true that Pierre Poilievre was just holding back for this one. Don't do anything interesting in the French debate. There's not much for the Conservatives to gain in Quebec. It's just how Quebec works. The regions that the different parties own, they really own them. And you have to gain like 10% of the vote as the Conservatives to actually start winning substantially more seats than they already have. So it seems like what Poilievre did was he held back. And then in this debate, he basically just took like Carney and just threw haymakers. It was like a spinning arm windmill punch to his gut every single time he got the microphone, except if the question just wasn't possible to attack someone else on and you look petty. That was a clinic on debating. Carney is a weak candidate. I've been saying this. His problem is that he is boring. He is beige wallpaper personified. He has nothing interesting to say. All of his attacks from the Liberals, like the stupid security clearance attack, they only work if he doesn't have somebody who can fight back against him in the same room. He can make that a case on Twitter. He can talk about it on a news show. But as soon as Poilievre is there standing in front of him, he tries to hit him with that security clearance thing. Poilievre can just hit him with a rotary phone and just be like, okay, but you literally don't care about your own candidates threatening conservative candidates. You have been dealing with China. You are soft on Iran. You don't actually care about Canada's national security. It was so good. And at the start of the debate, that was hilarious. It started off with the betrayal of Caesar, with Poilievre, Singh, and Blanchet just stabbing Mark Carney to death right away to make it so to make it very clear that he is not going to win this election. I think right now, before this debate, I would give a coin toss who's going to win the minority government or a majority. I now give it, this is a 85% chance of a conservative victory. That was brilliant. If any voters were leaning liberal before that debate, they are not leaning now, or at least half of the people who are leaning liberal are not leaning anymore. This is going to shred them. It might not pop up in the polls tomorrow or the next day. Obviously, it takes a while for you to, it's not going to show up in the polls tomorrow because most of the polling would have been done before the debate. But within 2 or 3 days, we are going to see a big move because you couldn't have called Poilievre a bully in that debate, which is good. It's brilliant. He was very firm, but he always went back to, I'm a strong, principled leader who can lead the country forward, and I have a nice, positive vision for us all. Good, because he always did that to follow up a absolutely staggering attack on Mark Carney. It was very intelligent the way that he did that. By the way, before I jump over to some super chats, because I do need to catch up on those, my goodness, isn't it the biggest tell on the planet that the debate commission canceled the Q&A period with journalists? They know he sucked. And it seems like somebody staged some sort of a fight. So Ezra Levant or some independent media people got into a fight, and it wasn't the independent media's fault, with a journalist at the Hill Times. Apparently there was this crazy meltdown that happened backstage with this journalist right in the middle in the spotlight, looking back towards the independent media guys like Drea and Kean and others sitting behind him and getting into this crazy debate or crazy fight for no reason. And this is apparently why the debate commission canceled the Q&A, because there was a security threat because a Hill Times reporter couldn't keep his brain in his head.
No. Oh, so if it was conservative, you would call for him. The voice doesn't work.
They're arguing about the Ryan Turnbull story, I believe.
Honestly, I have respect for this sort of.
No, I know. I think that's what they're arguing about is the Ryan Turnbull story
Your little chattering
that
class.
Kean did.
You probably can't hear it very well, but apparently this is like this debate that goes on for over 5 minutes, where this man from the Hill Times is having an absolute meltdown. And that is what caused at one point Ezra Levant to be removed from the room by security. And apparently he got like shuffled off to another room and handcuffed or whatever. It's nuts what's going on. And like, I don't know why any of this is happening, but it gave the debate commission a great excuse to not have the Q&A afterwards. Because goodness, every media journalist would have to ask Carney about his bad debate performance. Everyone who had any integrity would ask him how he thought that went, because it did not go very well at all. My goodness. I know some people are saying to show the whole video. The audio is a bit off right now. If you guys go on social media, you'll be able to find it. Maybe I'll even drop the link to the fight in the comments. Kean Bexty has it. I will get you his POV footage so that you guys can go watch that if you want. The actual, you can watch the actual debate he had with that Hill Times journalist from his own perspective, so you'll actually be able to hear what they're saying. But goodness, I'm going to do a full debate breakdown later. I'm not going to go through all the clips tomorrow, or maybe I'll shoot it later tonight. I'm not going to go through every single clip of the debate, because you should just watch the debate. Anyone should just watch the debate. But I will be going through like the major points, all the attacks from Poilievre on Carney, because that's really the main thing here. I will mention the Blanchette attacks, what he said, what Singh said, his annoying interruptions. But the real thing there is that Poilievre bested Carney, and he did it while being positive. In terms of, yes, he was very negative against Carney, but it wasn't like he didn't have this dark demeanor of seeming negative and nasty. It was just very, very well done. That's all I can say there. Just going to some of the super chats so we can catch up. Hugh says, for $5, the fact that Carney married a trans woman is very stunning and brave. I wouldn't be rude to his wife, guys. His wife's fine. Programmer X for $5 says, we didn't need housing under him. Lol, all homes were affordable. Absolutely. I know Programmer X is talking about Singh saying, you only built 6 homes when you were the housing minister. I'm like, yes, affordable housing is stupid. Affordable housing programs by the government don't work. And so I'm happy that when Poilievre was the housing minister, he mostly just focused on making it so that the private market could provide housing. Verinder Sidhu says, what do you think so far? Fun, lame? Parts of the debate were lame. Parts of it were very fun. Every time it went to Carney or Singh and Blanchette for an extended period of time, that's where the debate went to die. I actually saw JJ McCullough talking earlier today on Twitter saying that he went in Vancouver to go watch the debate in a theater, and he said that some people were getting up halfway through and leaving, and he said it was because it was kind of boring. I think it's probably because they were Liberal supporters who knew that he was losing, that Carney was losing. Anthony Salerno says, Wyatt, sorry about the spam. I got a little excited. No worries. Thank you for the $2 super chat. $2 from Anthony Salerno. Wyatt Claypool for Prime Minister, Carney for jail. Well, maybe one day. Who knows? Maybe I'll try and run for Prime Minister. For now, I'd run for MP. I hope I'm allowed to run someday rather than being kicked out of a nomination like I was. If you guys don't know the background, I ran for the Calgary Signal Hill nomination in 2024. And right before the election, the vote, because I had around 1,000 supporters and I was very clearly probably one of the favorites to win, I was kicked out alongside another person because they wanted to advantage one candidate. And I actually mobilized my people to still vote down ballot against that person, and they still lost. And that person since then, even though they lost the Calgary Signal Hill nomination, despite being given every advantage by HQ, then was appointed to another riding, and they're running currently in Calgary. It's so pathetic, but I will definitely run some other day. CMZ says, for $13.99, thank you for that. I'll be happy once the election is over. I'll hopefully not have to see Mark Carney, Jagmeet Singh, and especially Frank Dominic on a near weekly basis, near weekly, sometimes daily basis. I am so sorry for showing too many clips of Frank Dominic, but he tends to make my points for me that the left doesn't have any points. Kichi.com for $5. Thank you for that. Says the left have always been better in delivering their message than us right-wingers. Hopefully Pierre Poilievre can change that. And I absolutely think he did tonight. Carney just talks like a bureaucrat. Even at his best, he's not good. And that's the problem. That the Liberals went into this debate with more than a third of their supporters not being very decided on the Liberals. This was such a bad performance for Carney. I could see even people who thought they were decided for the Liberals changing votes. But even if it's just the soft supporters who might end up leaving in some portion, they're so dead. They can't lose 10 or 20% of their soft supporters. They need every bit of it to win. And they absolutely lost, and Carney and Poilievre gained. Anthony Salerno says for $2, Jagmeet derp, 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 derp. Yes. Singh was just nauseating. He was just annoying. He was like a cuckoo clock. Every time someone else was talking, he would start interrupting them, and he'd have nothing to interrupt. You'd just be like, you don't actually believe in public health care. Oh, Poilievre's lying. He wants to let people pollute all the time. It's like, okay there. Fair enough. Oh my goodness. Anyways, CTR Lee for $5 says Carney have to use the Trump card because that's his Trump card. And it didn't even, notice how he even stopped using it after the halfway mark, because I think at some point it started just getting obnoxious. Because Trump was a big issue 3 weeks ago. Right now, it really feels like you're just, some old 60s band, your Herman's Hermits playing the same hits over and over and over again. He's like Neil Young. He will not stop playing old stupid songs nobody wants to listen to anymore. I have a particular dislike for Neil Young, not just since he endorsed Carney. He's just always sucked. Him endorsing Carney is the American Dream album of endorsements, to put it that way. Jimmy, I love that you have Crow T Robot as your avatar. It's literally the background to my browser right now, or my desktop. It's them looking at my desktop like it's a movie screen. And I was literally just watching the MST3K episode for Final Sacrifice, which I recommend to everybody because it's an Alberta-based film that they make fun of. It's a whole show, if you don't know Mystery Science Theater 3000, where they just make fun of really bad movies with these like robot puppets commentating. But Jimmy for $6.99 says, seeing the downfall of Mark, and I don't mean trip from the curb, I mean a cliff. Absolutely. That was bad. I don't think the Liberals are going to be like 28% on election day because of this, but they'll be at 38 or 39 or 37. Maybe they'll just be 40, but I guarantee the Conservatives will probably win. Not guarantee. I can't guarantee anything. But I could see now the Conservatives winning the popular vote by 3 or 4 points. Statislav Kogan for $2 says, please, less pontification. I'm sorry if I pontificated. I just didn't want the debate stream to just me sitting there saying nothing and be like, oh, because you could just watch CPAC and then just tune in later. Hugh for $2 says, please keep pontificating, Wyatt. That's why we watch. Well, I guess why some people watch. Statislab doesn't appreciate me or something like that. Bushrat for $10, thank you, says, most politicians are insulated from the effects of crime everyday people encounter. We need a PC government tougher in crime. Pierre Poilievre gets this. And his crime question or answer, that was actually an underrated part of the debate. Not that people have really evaluated the debate yet, but in time, I think that will be underrated. He was the tough on crime guy, and everyone else was the waffler. Every single other person was the waffler, especially Jagmeet Singh, who was called out by the moderator, Steve Paikin, in his question, saying, well, you've talked about wanting to reduce the presence of the RCMP because of institutional racism or whatever. And then Jagmeet Singh had to basically dodge like he's like the Roadrunner or something like that. I think I just saw the Roadrunner because that's somebody's avatar in chat. Scott S. says, for $20, you're the man, Wyatt. Thanks, pal. Well, you're the man, Scott, for having sent in a $20 donation, but thank you for that, and thanks for supporting the show. Life of Timothy 3x 3 times 7 equals 21 says, for $20, is there rampant crime in Canada because we have no rights to defend ourselves or weak laws? I personally think it's a combo, with about 90% because we dial 911 after a crime rather than prevent it. We need more laws. I would probably flip that because there is more crime in many American cities despite gun ownership. Fundamentally, that there are layers of defense, because generally speaking, criminals break and enters aren't very common, and that's what personal gun ownership does prevent. That's why I believe we should be allowed to have personal gun ownership, but that tends to be the more rare crime. The main thing is retail theft. It's random violence in the streets from, drug addicts. It's random, it's car thefts. It's stuff where the criminal is trying to not encounter somebody to stop them, whether they have a gun or not. So I would say 90% of the problem is our weak laws. 10% is the lack of free access to gun ownership for law-abiding citizens. I think we should have that, and I don't disagree with you at all. I just think that it's mostly the soft on crime laws that have made a violent crime and retail theft and drug crime so rampant. Life of Timothy, $2 says less laws and bureaucracy, more rights to defense. Here's also an interesting thing. In Calgary, because I used to be a supervisor at a liquor store for 5 years straight, so I have had to call the police on people. I've had to stop people from trying to steal from us. I've been told don't even prevent them from stealing because, it's not worth it, because they're probably not even going to get locked up for anything if you stop them. But the thing is that I've been told by the Calgary police that it is like legitimately, you go out there, you arrest a guy, you book him, he immediately gets out of prison, and then you're stuck doing paperwork for like 5 hours, even if it's just a mere like stopping somebody for basic theft, and it's like clear cut they did it, they still get out. Anthony Salerno for $5 says local 496 in Calgary supports NDP and Liberals. I need to see what the local 496 is in Calgary. I wonder if you're talking about the police, because you said that, I remember right when we were talking about police in the debate. Sorry, I'm now looking this up. I'm just curious about this. I assume that that's what you meant. It's loading a bit slow at the moment. Unless you're talking about it says Pipes Trade Union in Calgary. Well, maybe that's just them being dumb then, because every other trade union in the East is going for the Conservatives. Jimmy for 279 says middle debate grading for all the leaders. Okay, we are past the middle point, but if I was to say middle point of the debate, I would give Carney like a C minus, which is what I gave him in the French debate. Just nothing to write home about. Had some bad moments. Overall, is just meh. I would have given Poilievre at that point an A, and I would give him an A after the debate too. After the debate, midway point, I'd give him a C minus. After the debate, D minus. That was just bad. Jagmeet Singh, midway, gets a D. At the end, he gets an F because he was just annoying. Maybe the left of Canada liked that, but I can't get in the minds of somebody that left-wing who would think that was good. Blanchet, midway through, I would say he got a B minus. He wasn't that good early on, and I think he recovered a bit and had a B plus by the end. I think Blanchet has been a solid debater in both debates. I even think I gave him an A in the first one. Did I accidentally? I think I accidentally unstarred that one. It doesn't matter though, I've already read it. So, Yagmi 018 for $5 says new immigrant here can find an engineering job. Can't find an engineering job because of the crap licensing laws. Graduated from Chicago and then Waterloo. Well, that's stupid. You literally went from the University of Waterloo and you can't get licensed in Canada. That's actually insane. And yeah, like why wouldn't we want people who are engineers who've studied in the US and Canada to be immediately allowed to work here? And yeah, I feel for you because all my friends are engineers and computer scientists for the most part. One guy's an artist, and I want him to start making mugs and t-shirts for the channel because he's a very good artist. Interesting Flow for $10 says, thanks for your optimistic coverage. Do you see Blanchette as an ally to the CPC? And should I vote BQ if my riding has a good chance of flipping a Liberal seat, even though I'm a Conservative? I would actually say yes. If the Bloc Québécois have a better chance of beating the Liberals than the Conservatives, then I would go for them. The Bloc can easily be an ally of the Conservatives if there's a minority government. They will be obstinate on energy. They will be obstinate on equalization, although Poilievre, rightfully so, is not promising to end it. That is a second or third term thing to do, because what you want to do to change equalization is first improve the economy so much most of the provinces or have provinces rather than have not provinces. Then you can start making changes. But the Bloc Québécois, its survival is based on not being seen as liberal lapdogs. That's why Blanchette has been rightfully very aggressive with Carney. He knows that if he is complicit with the Liberals, what's the point of voting Bloc? If in Quebec, voting Bloc and Liberal is the same thing. He has to differentiate himself, and that's what he's doing in that debate. And that's why he will be more willing to work with Conservatives to prove that he's dynamic and his party can shift who it's willing to support to see, how they're going to perform as long as they respect Quebec. So, he's a bit of a broken record, but he's a broken record for a very specific reason. Chad Harris says for $5, thank you, Chad. I don't understand how anybody can listen to Mark's cronies statements and not see the blatant contradictions to his other statements and track record. Most people won't, because most people are not political junkies, but there will be enough people who see the contradictions, because he's not going to convince any Conservatives with this routine, anyone who's currently voting Conservative. But there might be a good portion of Liberals, like 10%, even just 5%, who are like, well, that doesn't line up with what he said 20 minutes ago. And they might end up defecting or going to the NDP or just not voting. And the Liberals losing 5% of the current vote is them losing 1.5% or 2%. That would be very, very bad for them. Epic Encore for $5. Thank you. Says, why won't anyone ask Carney if he thinks Trudeau's government was good? His answer could expose him and cost him votes. Well, you have to then give Cian Bexty credit over at Juno News, because he asked him that at the Q&A, which is also why the Debates Commission probably canceled the Q&A this time, because he got absolutely swamped by independent conservative media. And it's just random chance. It's just random draw that they are allowed to ask a question. And Cian asked him if he thought Justin Trudeau was a good prime minister, and he said, yes, he was a good prime minister. He talked about a lot of good issues, and we share a lot of opinions on things, and I think he had the general right direction. It's like, oh my goodness, dude. That's such a stupid answer. Nobody likes Trudeau. Nobody. There are certain Liberals who really do like him, but saying you like him is not winning any votes. And frankly, saying you don't like him or you thought he messed up is not going to get any of those hardcore Liberal Trudeau lovers to leave, because they are more dedicated to the Liberal Party than they are to Trudeau, even if they almost worship him as a cult leader. Programmers X for $5 says Carney is trying to use buzzwords and fantasy works to confuse the old people to keep voting for him. I think so, and that's what he was probably using with the Trump line. He knows, and it's not going after older voters. It is just a fact, though, that someone over the age of 55 or 65 is more likely to be watching television news as their main source of information. So those people are naturally going to be more likely to be teed up on thinking that Trump is the biggest problem on the planet at all times, and that whoever says that they dislike Trump the most is getting their vote, and that, well, didn't you listen to all of Carney's great priorities that the CBC has been gushing about? It sounds great. And this still also happens with people who are very young on the left. They constantly get TikTok videos promoting stupid garbage that the NDP is doing, and they think it's brilliant because all they get is a diet of NDP nonsense. So that is correct. That I think that's why he was throwing those buzzwords in. He's using the buzzwords that Global News, CTV News, and CBC have been hitting on for weeks, because he's trying to kind of cash in on the sort of fertilizing that those legacy media companies have done for voters who watch a lot of legacy media programs. Programs X says, dude said the word Islamist, wow, and you're referencing Blanchette calling out the Islamists attacking Jewish people in Quebec and in Ontario, as well as Vancouver. And that was good. I give him credit. Jason Curling says, for $2, thank you, Jason. Thank you, stream this. Well, I assume you mean thank you for streaming this, but you probably had your word count get cut off because they have very small amounts of words you're allowed to use if you only pay $2. But obviously, I'm going to try and get back to live chat. I do not require people to donate to ask me questions, but you guys are just frankly very nice and generous. Holdaway for $10 just sends in $10 and that's it. And that's why Holdaway is a hero of the chat. Moto Gear Solid for $5, which I assume is a slight reference to Metal Gear Solid, says they just canceled the post-media scrum. They know Carney got cooked. They want him answering questions for 10 minutes. They don't want him answering questions for 10 minutes to independent media. Absolutely. And yeah, so he got cooked. They thought the independent media questions went terrible last time, so they just got rid of it completely. They do not like Rebel News that much. Leighton Tomlinson says for $6.99, insane how the topic of conversation in these debates has done a 180 degrees since 2021's debate. Before there would be a left-leaning, they would all be at left-leaning talking points. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was the tragedy of Aaron O'Toole as a conservative leader. Utterly garbage, fumbled every issue, and because of media pressure and activist group pressure, he would constantly knife his base in the back. Guys, if you ever run in politics, it's not that you should constantly spout off what hyper-populist rhetoric that people use online, because people talk online not the way people talk in real life, and it would rightfully turn people off. The way you talk on Twitter is not how you should talk to someone at the door. But politics is a game of bases. You are driving out your base. That is what an election campaign is all about. Don't chase the voters who don't want to show up. Know what you do? 90% of the people who are going to get you elected are the people who really like you. Drive those people out, and eventually the other 10% that you need will show up too, because a friend got them to vote, or, a lot of people have confidence in this guy, I guess I'll vote for him too. Or maybe they don't love you, but they like a couple of the issues that you talk about quite passionately. They don't like you they don't like you on social issues, or they don't love you on economic issues, but they really like you on crime. That is how you put together a coalition. But Aaron O'Toole's idea was that, if a moderate in the middle voter doesn't like me talking about this, I'm going to stop talking about that. And then I'm going to reverse my position on this. And then I'm going to roll out some very mealy-mouthed moderate language to make it seem like I connect with them. Stop chasing the voters who don't want to vote for you. It's foolish. Anyway, so, I almost missed Brandon here, or Braden. Braden Campfus, I think I'm saying that right, Campfus, for $6.99 says, I still feel like there's a lack of authenticity with Pierre. If you're detecting that in a debate, I would say it's because every leader's a little bit unauthentic when it comes to the debates. Like his last thing where he's like, I feel very bad not being able to hear people's stories, and he's a little teary-eyed. He's like, he's not actually teary-eyed. I think it's just a debate thing. Maybe he can think about something that gets him emotionally worked up, but I would say that Poilievre is best when he's doing those long-form discussions, because you can't really hide who you are in them. And I think he's a fairly decent guy when all things come down to it. But yeah, authenticity on a debate stage is not what you should be looking for, because debates are not about authenticity so oftentimes. Sophia 6547 for $5. Thank you for that, Sophia. Some people are saying Poilievre wasn't aggressive enough, i.e. he wasn't, when he's in question period, he didn't have a Brian Mulroney moment. Thoughts? I really don't. I think he was perfectly fine. I thought he really battered Carney hard on the questions he needed to. Carney looked unprepared. Carney was just a complete sourpuss the entire time. That guy looked like he was stuck in the woods for 10 weeks, and we just stuck him on the debate stage. He's like, wants a shower. I shouldn't even have to be here. I'm tired. I don't like it. He was horrible. As I had said, he looked like a disappointed lizard so much whenever people were attacking him. Zod for $5. Thank you, Zod. I wish Poilievre explained how he enabled private industry to build homes, and that six-house figure is just through the federal government. Yeah, so, and I think it's just more so he was maybe not wanting to be sidetracked. I wish he would have just said, yes, because I enabled the private sector to build homes, because I don't believe it's the government's duty to be driving the housing market. We should be enabling the housing market to drive itself. Michael Habib for $20. Thank you, Michael, says, look at the CBC. They're trying to tell people what to think about before voting right now. The panels on the CBC are such garbage. I know I'm probably going to see someone from the CBC say Mark Carney did quite well, actually, if you think about it. English is not his actual first language. So you should have more, you should be more congratulatory of him, because that actually lying is for his first language. So English is very difficult for him. But yeah, it's pathetic. right now, the Google Trends. My goodness, my voice here. Google Trends is currently, my goodness, Google Trends is currently showing Poilievre and Mark Carney tied, but based on how that debate went, I really don't see it as being positive in Mark Carney's side. If people are looking at Mark Carney, it's not exactly for good reasons. And it's also hard not to be one of the main guys looked up in a debate where you're one of the main two people on stage. David Edwards for $5 says Carney royally effed up by asking that security question. Also, how was the feeling at the doors in balls riding? I've done one day of door knocking in Barbara Ball's riding of Nepean running against Mark Carney directly. The second day, there was a lot of GOTV prep work that I was doing in their office. It was just, putting stickers on stuff and, putting things in boxes and preparing it for tomorrow. And then I was in Canada today, but doing GOTV, basically door hanger dropping for all of the key supporters of Greg Kung, the Conservative candidate in Canada. We were just making sure that they had all their information so they can vote early tomorrow. Guys, by the way, vote tomorrow or vote the next day or vote anytime in early voting. Make sure the lines are very low or very thin on election day so that those low propensity voters don't balk at the size of the lineup and say, I'm just going to go home and watch hockey or football. Make sure that the lines are free and clear so those people who don't usually vote don't think, an hour? I'm not standing in line for an hour. So yeah. Also, subscribe to the channel, guys. Dang it. Subscribe to the channel because you actually can't comment unless you've been a subscriber for at least an hour. Smug Doug for $13.99 says, Wyatt, the channel is doing well. Over 2,000 Canadians are taking time out of their evenings to watch you right now. Congratulations. Yes, I am absolutely blessed by your guys' presence tonight. Thank you for so many people watching and actually taking a part of their evening out to spend it with me watching the debate. I absolutely agree with Smug Doug. That is very nice of you all. Makers and Joe for $6.99. Thank you for that. Waiting for Center of Beliefs Control, CBC. Try and spin this. Pierre nailed the debate. Great connection with audience. Absolutely. That's the thing. He had the pattern of he slammed Carney and then he stood up confidently and talked about his vision. That was very good. It was a bad debate for Poilievre, even if he was hitting Carney hard. Would have been if he was hitting him and 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 he was being negative of the Trudeau government. Then he was hitting Carney more. That would have made him look like a bully in a way that the CBC is trying to been attempting to prep people for. That he's a bully, he's Trump-like. So if he was too sanctimonious, if he was too strident, then he would have made himself look bad. He would, again, wallop Carney, and while Carney was on the floor wheezing, he would then say, you know what we should be doing for Canadians? A bunch of like this and that or whatever. Very well done by Poilievre on that front. Crimson Phoenix for $20. Thank you for that. I'm a bit indecisive right now. I'm in Rivière des Milles riding, and I don't know if I should keep my Conservative vote or go block for a chance to steal a seat from the Liberals. Blanchette was great, by the way, and I would agree. Blanchette, especially for the man who is speaking his second language in that debate, did quite well. If the Bloc Québécois have a better chance in your riding, I'd vote for them. I assume you're around the Montreal suburbs area or in Montreal itself. There's no chance of Conservatives winning in Montreal. Outside of Mount Royal. If you live in Mount Royal, definitely vote Conservative. If you don't live in Mount Royal, but you're in Montreal, vote Bloc Québécois, because there's no chance that Conservative wins in those ridings for the most part. $5 from Peeper Jean. Thank you for that. Love your channel. Watching from the USA. This debate has put some of my worries for the election at ease. Praying for Canada and Poilievre. Are you down in Phoenix? Because I know a lot of people in Canada always skip down to Phoenix for the warmer weather. I'm a weird person, but yeah, thank you for the $5 super chat. I'm a weird person, which goes without saying, but I hate warm weather. I like maybe 15 degrees. Past that, I melt. I can walk in very cold weather without much of like a coat or a sweater on because my goodness, I'm so warm-blooded. If it actually does get warm outside, I start overheating. It's crazy. Anthony Salerno says, CBC breaking news, Mark Carney wins the debate. Oh, of course he won the debate. But yeah, the CBC is going to try and claim it. Celtic Lighting just sends in $5. Thank you, Celtic Lighting. I assume that you are an actual lighting company. Guys, if you know where Celtic Lighting exists, go use Celtic Lighting. Nerdy Dave DD says, discovered your channel a few weeks ago. Thank you for the constant quality coverage. Well, thank you for watching, considering that I am just a man with a microphone and a literal camera. I literally have to attach the camera onto the top of my laptop. This is not a professional camera. And then I have this like light that Brittany got me to buy, which is a very good asset here, because usually when I went to hotels, I would just have like the worst hotel lighting around me. Everything would be like hazy and like warm. It was horrible. But yeah, thank you for watching and subscribing. Eric C for $27.99 says, just wanted to say I love your work and watch every day. Keep it up. Go Blue, Leafs, and Pierre Polyev. Well, thank you. And is Toronto actually in the playoffs this year? You will not be shocked to find out that I do not watch a lot of hockey. Oh, wow. They're actually first in their division. Okay, wow. Okay. Well, knowing it's the Toronto Maple Leafs, they're still somehow going to find a way of losing the playoffs. But, you know, honestly, I hope they win. I actually know who I hope they win. I hope the Senators win. If they elect a conservative other than Polyev around the Ottawa Donut. If they elect Greg Kung, or especially if they elect Barbara Ball, Senators are allowed to win, and I'd want them to win, because the Senators have never won, and I like underdogs winning things because it's funny to me. Like, I want the Winnipeg Jets to win, because there are so many people who watch hockey in the U.S. who are like, where's Winnipeg? Because nobody knows where Winnipeg is on a map, barely in Canada. FHawk595 says, thoughts on Carney's question to Pierre Polyev on Pierre Polyev not getting a security clearance? I think it did major damage to Carney based on Polyev's answer. 100%. It was so easy to turn that around on him. It was such a stupid question, because it's a question, or it's a dig at the conservatives and Polyev that only works back when Polyev and the conservatives couldn't respond, because either Carney's just saying it to a media outlet and they're just printing what he said, and there's no ability for the conservatives to have a right of reply at the time. It's great fodder for emails, for donations. It's great on social media. But if Polyev is in the room saying, hey, whoa, if I actually took that security clearance, I wouldn't have been able to even talk about foreign interference at all. I wouldn't have been able to talk about anything that is even tangentially related to the Nisakop report, which means he couldn't have talked about the Paul Chang situation. That might be an exaggeration. He might have been able to talk about the Paul Chang situation, but still, he is generally correct that you wouldn't have been able to talk about a lot of foreign interference that was going on. Celtic Lighting says, for $5, free the shackles, Canada, vote Polyev. Absolutely. I know there are some PPC people flooding the chat early on and talking about, like, well, Polyev's actually lefty. No, he's not. Are there things I wish Polyev was better on from my perspective? Absolutely. I'm pro-life. I wish he was pro-life. I wish he wanted to reduce immigration as much as me. I wish a bunch of things. I wish he was in favor of open carry or concealed carry for handguns. That would be great. He's not, but he's also 1,000 times better than the liberals. The PPC saying, have you read our platform? Our platform's better than conservative platform. One, that's heavily debatable, because I do not agree with a lot of PPC foreign policy, and their plan of saying zero immigration is unreasonable in the extreme. I'm in favor of heavy immigration cuts. At the same time, I want a certain amount of flexibility. If there's some engineer who wants to move here from Nigeria, I want him. If there's some random low-wage worker from Bangladesh who wants to move here with 7 dependents, no, I do not want him. So I would want a 100,000 PR cap and a severe reduction of temporary foreign workers and students, with values testing and a strict point system that doesn't allow you to bring tons of dependents with you and requires you to have means when you show up. You don't get to show up with $0 and then constantly need to feed on the system. And David Edwards says, for $5, listen, everyone in Ontario, your early poll stations are open at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Get out and vote early. Vote like your country depends on it. Absolutely. By the way, guys, subscribe to the channel. It won't help the country, but it helps me out. I'm just kidding. But I just suspect if there's more than 2,000 people watching, there might be people who are not yet subscribers. So do that. And if I get to 100,000 subscribers by mid-December of this year, I don't have to buy my friends dinner, because I made this very stupid bet where if I get to 100,000 subscribers by that point, they owe me dinner. Like 4 guys owe me 1 guy dinner. But if I lose, I owe all of them dinner. It's mostly just a bet to freak myself out so much that I have to keep growing the channel. So I can't wake up and be lazy. JBF Floatum says, for $2.79, did Polyev misstep with the 2030 2% NATO timeline? I don't think he did. I think he put out a frankly realistic timeline. We're only at like 1.2, 1.3% spending right now. But the problem with a lot of that spending is it's complete crap. It's DEI, HR nonsense, and we don't actually spend on real military equipment. That was my point about Ukraine. We send Ukraine garbage. We spend $2 billion sending Ukraine garbage. We pay the Chinese, who are Russian allies, to send purely reconnaissance drones to Ukraine. Do we not think that China might be allowing the Russians to have access to that data that the Ukrainians are collecting with the drones? I don't know how they work, but I wouldn't exactly want China to be involved. So we are literally pumping the economy of China to send things to Ukraine rather than doing what the Americans do and just giving them old military equipment we are going to throw out anyways, because old military equipment from Canada and the US is still modern by Ukrainian standards. Michael says, for £5 or €5 for 5 almighty euros, 78 to 80% favors Carney on poly markets. Let's make some money back and vote Polyev for the win. I do not doubt that a lot of people would make money on poly market if they end up betting on Carney, although I do not bet. I actually, in fact, turn off betting ads on the channel, because what you can do if you ever get monetized on YouTube, and I would recommend all YouTubers do this, I turn off any ads about alcohol, gambling, anything that's sexually suggestive and whatnot. I'm trying to run a family channel. I'm not going to put up stuff like, get rich quick scheme ads and whatnot going on. G.I. Joe Dave C says straight from the pit just gives $10. That is a mouthful of a name. So you've earned the $10, or I've earned the $10 by saying that. G.I. Joe Dave C straight from the pit gives $10. Well, thank you for helping fund the channel. Programmer X says, meet up in Nepean tomorrow for $2. I might be in Nepean. I also might be in Canada tomorrow. I might be going to Nepean because I might be meeting someone else anyways first. I'll figure it out. I was going to try and meet someone else tomorrow morning. This is what sucks about showing up for campaigning, because I'm not going to, it's hard to take a day off and say, oh yeah, screw you campaigns. I'm just going to go hang out with some people in a day. Maybe I'll be there. Brian O for $5 says, just saw CBC Rosemary Barton talking about right-wing media yesterday causing their building to get sniffed for bombs and surrounded by police today. Oh yeah, it was Rebel. It was Drea Humphrey probably planting bombs. Jimmy for $2.79 says, Carney just said that to join the digs on. Carney just said that to join the digs on Carney. I assume that you're talking about Carney and making a fool of himself just to get in on making a fool of himself that everyone else is doing. Patrick just sends in $2, and I appreciate you, Patrick, for doing that. Andre George says, for $10, you're doing great job. Keep it up. Keep it up. What are theoretical chances for Polyev to win? I would say if the polls move like I expect they will because of that debate, which I'm not saying it's going to be like 10% swing. If I assume that Abacus data is right, with the Liberals leading by 2 points right now, although even in their own polls, when they ask people, are you confident in voting for your choice? The Conservatives are in fact leading by 1. Let's assume that the +2 is realistic. Even then, I would actually probably assume it's a tie right now, but let's assume the +2 from Abacus is realistic. I would say that the Conservatives will probably gain a couple points, or even just 1 point, or 1.5 points. The main thing that's going to happen, in my opinion, is that Carney and the Liberals are going to go from, if we assume they're at 42% or 40%, they'll drop down to 36. And the Conservatives might grab up 1 point of that, but the NDP will grab 2 and the Bloc will grab 1. I think that's what's going to happen here. FreezerMan71 for $5 says, great content. Wyatt, could the NDP disappear like Dan McTeague has suggested? I live in BC and voted for the BC Conservatives. BC is in trouble. I assume you mean the provincial BC Conservatives. Oh my goodness, the provincial BC Conservatives are such a trash fire right now. They're letting all the woke United people run them. And the 3 independents, Dallas Brody, Jordan Keeley, and Tara Armstrong, are doing a fantastic job. Honestly, I hope more join them, because John Rustad is absolutely wasting his caucus. But would the NDP disappear like Dan McTeague is saying? And by the way, when I ran for Calgary Signal Hills Conservative nomination, one of my endorsers was Dan McTeague. He's a great guy. And we are both united on backing up Kevin Vlong as one of the best independent MPs, who unfortunately is not going to be in Parliament after this, when Parliament resumes again. I don't think the NDP is going to get wiped out because they are dumping money to protect incumbents. And what's going to happen, I think, is that in a lot of ridings where the NDP aren't trying, they're only going to get 6% or 4% or 7%. In the ridings where they have incumbents, I think there's a good chance that they hold on. $5 from Donna M. Love Wyatt and Daniel forever. Always entertaining, informative. Also, yes, please do TNT merch. Well, hopefully I'll have Daniel Boardman back at some point to do another stream. He, in fact, is actually in British Columbia right now, so I knew he didn't have any of his commitment to do a stream. But I'll definitely try and do something with him soon. Bob Seaman says, for $2.79, why does Polymarket suggest that Carney won? I don't think they suggest he won. It's just been that the trend has been that Carney's been up in Polymarket. You're going to see that probably drop heavily in the next 24 hours. The problem with Polymarket in Canada is, unlike the US, there's a lot of information about politics that you can get in the US to know where the campaigns are at, if they're making mistakes, where they're investing their money, which state they're focusing on, how they're doing in those individual states. Canada, there's not as much information for people to go on. So I found that a lot of people place their money on Polymarket just based on what the polls are saying, and that's it. And I would say that most of the polls are heavily overemphasizing the Liberals' chances. G.I. Joe Dave C. straight from the pit for $6 says, I vote conservative. I like 1980s NES. Also, my fave game is Contra and Predator. Great channel. I don't even think I have, because if you guys don't know what he's talking about, or you're only watching me for the first time, whenever I'm in my home studio, I always have a old Nintendo Entertainment System cartridge on my left, and I actually don't think I have Contra. I have Super C. Super C is a great game. Do you know what's a fantastic game, though, and it's really hard to find and is expensive, is I really want Gun Knack. Gun Knack is a fantastic game. It holds up. It's not like good for the time. Gun Knack's just straight up good now. So I'd love to find Gun Knack. I have played emulators of it, of course, but I just don't have an actual cartridge. Noah Cormier says, I was working and missed the debate. Could you rank everyone with letter grades? Letter grades, Polyvet's an A+. I know I'm a conservative, and it doesn't seem like it's come much from me to say an A+, but in the French debate, I gave him a B-, because, in fact, I think he held back for this debate. Polyev gets an A+ because he absolutely demolished Carney. Seemed positive, and I think that he makes a lot of people who were nervous about him before come back to the Conservative Party like they were previously intending to do back in November. By the way, we have exactly 1776 viewers right now, so happy birthday, America, even though it's not July 4th. I don't want to cut off this question. So, Polyev A+. I would give Blanchette a B+. Carney gets a D-, D+, maybe. And then Singh gets an F. Singh was terrible. Brian he says, pronounced Camphouse. Brian Camphouse for $6.99. Thank you for donating, just to correct me on how I said your name. Dutch doesn't make sense. Not impressed with Pierre Poilievre's foreign policy. What does helping Ukraine even mean? It's a deep-rooted problem. I think it is generally good for hostile foreign countries to not end up gaining more power through territorial acquisitions. And that is absolutely what Russia is trying to do with Ukraine, take over regions with a lot of resources in them, which will enable them to do more in the future, including trying to take over or exert power over oil and gas resources around the Arctic. They absolutely would do that if they could get away with invading Ukraine and not have anyone really push back on them after a few years. Because I know people have been pushing back on them hard, but still, if then the US pulls out and everyone pulls out support and Russia gets what they want, I don't think Putin's going to do anything more, because he's probably not going to do anything until for the rest of his life. But the next Russian leader says, well, Putin got away with that. Let's just be better prepared this time and we can do more. And that always happens with Russia. Russia always pushes the envelope, just like China, just like a lot of hostile foreign countries, Iran, Qatar. They end up pushing the envelope if you don't push back on them hard. That doesn't mean that needs to be a forever war. I think there needs to be an off-ramp right now. But the thing is, you actually don't get to a proper off-ramp for peace if you end up being weak. Because then the Russians know that they can keep pushing where there's mush. Exactly what Stalin's philosophy for a war is. You push wherever there's softness, and then you have to stop when they toughen up. Subin George Sajan for $5 says, where is Mr. Singh getting the data that Polyev built only 6 homes? MOH. Is it from NDP sources? It's that Poilievre, when he was briefly the Minister of Housing, only built 6 government affordable homes from the federal level. It's a stupid point because who cares if the government built homes or not? If homes were affordable, they were affordable, and the private market was providing them. If they're not affordable, who cares that the government is building a bunch of stuff? That's just what he thinks. Anthony Salerno says trans women are men, support women's rights. By the way, you guys should all go look up online Tara Armstrong's fantastic question in the BC legislature, where she just asked David Eby, the premier of British Columbia, what's a woman? What is a woman? And his attorney general had to stand up and basically say, we stand by queer folks and all this nonsense. It's like, guys, just answer the question. It's not hard. We have Versiric here for $20 saying, sorry, just tuned in, but have you seen Stuart Benson's effeminate meltdown over Rebel News being in the media room with him? Smells like the excuse the debate commission will fall on for canceling the questions. Absolutely, I think that is what they were doing there. Maybe I'll cut over to the footage later, but we're already on 3 hours and 20 minutes into this thing. But yeah, that's probably why they the excuse to cancel the debate Q&A. Verway Drafting Inc. says, love your content and coverage. Keep up the good work. P.S. I'd vote for you. Well, thank you. Hopefully you're in one of the ridings I run in someday. And thank you for the $6 donation. Jared Jason for $6.99 says, love what you're doing. Keep it up, man. Elevator mechanics for Pierre. Heck yeah. Is that a big constituent, elevator mechanics? Chris C says, nothing for $2.79, but I appreciate it all the same. $5 from Lori Soper says, National Telegraph is the most enlightening analysis on Canadian politics, at least for me. Thank you, Wyatt, for your consistency and dedication. I don't even think I exactly say anything that should blow your mind, but if I'm to give myself a compliment, and usually you shouldn't do that, I would at least say I'm good at not simplifying, but just generating good ways of putting things that you can use on your own friends and family and whatnot, that maybe the way I phrase something helps you talk to somebody about politics, rather than being hyper-populist rhetoric where if you tried to use it on someone, they'd be like, whoa, settle down, man. I talk very normally about politics, both on the show and in real life. Use a little humor here and there, but generally keep it nice and easy for even the most moderate person to follow. Although I don't take moderate positions, I take very conservative positions, but I can market them using center-left language. And Chris C says for $6.99, Rosemary Barton on CBC said Scrum was canceled because of dangerous white right-wing journalists. Ezra Levant is a terrorist, according to CBC. Thoughts? She's an absolute clown. Her boy got wiped out on the debate stage, and she and the media are trying to pretend like it's actually, they're trying to pretend that there's a good excuse to not have a Q&A because they didn't want the bleeding to continue. But yeah, Randy Friedrich says for $6.99, I have really appreciated your analysis on the polls. Good work. Well, thank you. Every once in a while, someone says like, Wyatt, how could you be correct on the polls when this new one came out that has the Liberals leading by 12% from Ecos or Angus Reid? It's because it's not a very good poll. There's sampling errors. They're obviously probably taking way too many people from urban areas. I think Frank Graves at Ecos is just making things up. Angus Reid, I think they just have a bad sample. I've heard that they use air miles data to get their sample sizes, which means that there's obviously kind of a bias towards people who work white-collar jobs. If you're taking people who have air miles cards, because those people are naturally going to fly more. And the people who fly the most, ironically, the people who vote liberal and apparently care about climate change the most, are obviously going to, be more liberal. People who fly more tend to be more liberal, which means that getting air miles data means your poll is always going to skew a little too liberal. Pollsters and good pollsters do try and do this. Pollsters need to do urban and rural balancing, and ideally they should do some postal code balancing or something like that. So if you're polling Saskatchewan, make sure that you're polling people outside of Regina and Saskatoon. That's how the Saskatchewan 2024 provincial election was so badly missed by the pollsters. Some of them were off by 17 points of the popular vote. And it's because when you pull a bunch of people in Saskatoon and Regina, especially public sector workers, you're getting a very NDP sample. Yeah. But yeah. And there was people also early on trying to spam the chat with like pro Carney stuff. I think that person eventually dropped out. I think it was like Jaron or something like that after the Carney started absolutely getting destroyed. Oh, here's actually a great point by Iron Guy 1614. Ecos has the rate tightening by like 8% tonight. Liberals down almost 6%. And that's the funny thing. That is a big tell. Do I think that the Liberals are still leading by 8%? No. But the fact that even Ecos has them falling shows that even with their screwed up sample, the momentum is shifting heavily in the Conservatives' favor. Well, thank you. I like that compliment. D-Man says, Wyatt's channel is for white collar and blue collar people. Yes, I think that's a good description. It's a channel for everybody. Comb over Chris says, Wyatt's channel is also for unemployed people like myself. Patch Duress says, for $16.99, comment for the progressive algorithm. I watched the French and English debates on Radio Canada, CBC. One new thing I considered is Radio Canada should be kept and CBC axed. Also, Bloc Québécois would be my second choice. Yeah, in parts of Quebec, I'd obviously vote Bloc just to block the Liberals, even though they actually technically are to the left of the Liberals outside of immigration and cultural issues. That's the funny thing. Quebec politicians are very hard left progressive on certain things, but then on immigration, they want no immigrants. Maybe we should jump. Should we jump over to it? Maybe we should. Let's maybe. We can jump over to the Kean Bexty thing when he had that run-in with the Hill Times reporter. And then maybe after this, we'll end up ending it because I need to film or sleep so I can film a video tomorrow breaking down the debate.
And things get homoerotic / because for plausible deniability. Also, the dudes are being kind of homophobic. That's one.
Do you have friends that get pretty homophobic at times?
Yeah, most of my gay friends.
Most of your gay friends.
Do you know how much? Do you know how fast? What was it? What was the F thing he used?
You say.
He said, yeah.
Was it fagotization?
Yeah.
That's run through my gay friends like wildfire. They
fagotization.
They love it.
They love fagotization.
They think it's the funniest word they've heard in a while.
So Ryan Turnbull.
Doing this voice doesn't actually
So
work.
Ryan Turnbull. No, I'm not. I'm curious. What do you just think that politicians should be off the hook for saying stuff like this?
What, 15 years ago? How long ago?
He was 30.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry,
So
who are you?
He wasn't a politician, so this was when he was.
He was a 30-year-old man.
Okay.
Who called gay men perverse.
Yeah, I think I've read through your story,
Yeah.
and I know you don't even believe that that's what he said.
Oh, I
Because know you're
100%
smarter
because
than
I
that, but
read
you're
it.
just-
I read it that
Yeah,
that's
no,
what he
I read
said.
it too. And you're
Okay,
I
so
don't
so
think you're a
you're,
very, I mean, you don't have any sort of morals or scruples. So
Okay.
you just throw it wherever you want. But I read it, and I know you're actually smarter than you pretend to be. So I know you know what he was.
so he typed the words on Facebook,
Mhm.
perverse fagotization, referring to
so
gay
that's the
men.
only
No,
thing he wrote.
just calm down for a second, guys.
No, I know, but I want you to
So
be honest.
I would love to contact this guy every time there is a stupid smear story against conservatives because I'd love him to try and apply his standards to the conservative. That's not what he meant. And the thing is, you know what? He's probably right that Ryan Turnbull's just being a jerk on Facebook, just trying to make jokes. I find jokes okay. I don't find all jokes funny. But if you're just making jokes, who cares? But the problem is the left doesn't actually believe that jokes are okay. They only care about jokes. They only think jokes are jokes when it's the left doing it. And if it's the right, it's a statement. It's a statement showing the man's blackened soul. You can't have that. It's disgusting. $6.99 super chat from Patch Duress. One more thing. Consider gameplay displaying Game Boy cartridges when you're on the road, and Kean Bexty pulling a James O'Keefe in this video. Absolutely. Yeah, this is reminding me a lot of the Acorn tapes. That would be actually a funny idea if I had like a small display for like small Game Boy cartridges behind me. But maybe that would be, too on the nose. I'd look too much like a dork.
So he said perverse fagotization, referring to homosexual men, And you think that that's an acceptable type of language for
Is that all
politicians to use?
Oh, well, he wasn't a
No,
politician.
that wasn't the only thing that he said.
yeah,
He
I
said
know.
a
I read
lot.
through what he said.
He said a lot of
Yeah, I read
extremely
through what he said.
homophobic stuff. And just because he's a liberal, you're trying to defend him. If this
No.
was a conservative,
so if it was a conservative, you would call for him to be removed, like Aaron
oh,
Gunn
absolutely. But
or
Aaron
Andrew
Gunn
Biden.
hasn't said something like that. And if you could point to them doing that, please let me know.
The voice doesn't
It's
work.
crazy that you're getting so emotional about this, though. And
He's pretending like Keane's putting on like artificial vocal fry. I've met Keane. I have talked to Keane when he wasn't doing media stuff. He sounds like this all the time.
how many of your
Honestly,
friends? How many of your friends drop F slurs just
um,
frequently?
I have respect for the industry and the profession.
Sure, you do. Yeah.
Your little chattering class.
Sure.
You
Sorry.
third-party advertisers that you
Who
work
are you?
for.
Who are you? Who do you work for?
Rebel News.
Who do you work for?
Rebel News, owned by Ezra Levant, is a different company.
Why are you screaming?
So they can stop spreading misinformation.
So
Also,
find it right now.
Why are you screaming, by the way?
Well, I want to make sure the guys filming it over there get the good audio.
Good.
Can you hear me okay? Am I enunciating properly?
Dude, this guy thinks he's cooking. This man thinks he's an extremely intelligent person.
Do you have one set up? You got the levels ready for me? Because you're clearly not doing any actual journalism while you're here.
You're supposed to maintain respectful discourse. It's right here in black and white.
Why?
Thank you, Drea.
When you guys started gaming the rules and threatening to sue because you didn't get your way, I assumed the rules were out the window.
No, it's right here in black and white. We follow the rules.
Oh,
It's the federal
was that like
court.
when it was in black and white saying you should only have one reporter credited so that everyone might have a chance?
Okay, he's trying to do this thing like Rebel News has gamed the system. No, they did not. Do you know what they did? The thing is that the CBC can send a reporter from every single station. The CBC Calgary can send one, CBC Edmonton, CBC Winnipeg, CBC Alberta, CBC BC, CBC Vancouver, CBC Victoria can send somebody, CBC Comox could send somebody, CBC Whitehorse could send somebody, and they all get to be individually credited and they're all allowed to ask questions. What the debate commission tried to do is that Rebel News only gets one reporter who gets the chance to potentially ask a question. Juno only gets one reporter to potentially be able to ask a question. But Rebel says, well, if they're allowed to send regional journalists, why can't Drea come from BC? Why can't Sheila Gunn Reid come from Alberta? Why can't David Menzies come from Ontario? Why can't Ezra come as somebody who's a Canada-wide and foreign reporter? Is that okay? And they sued and they won that case. And the debate commission pulled out of that case because they knew that that was right, that everyone gets to send multiple reporters if you're allowed to send regional reporters. Rebel would probably be fine with only having one person who's allowed to ask questions if every other station was only allowed to do that. If CBC just had one, CTV, City, Global, Globe and Mail, The Herald, if they did it that way, it'd be fine.
To ask a question, but
You're getting
instead,
the facts wrong.
you wanted to
Nobody
take,
thinks that
what was it,
way.
2-minute long questions so that Polyev only got asked 3 questions. He usually allows 4 because things move a little bit quicker at his press conferences. You guys are so verbose, I'll say. Most of us didn't get a question. And what I really don't enjoy is that everyone else here was being respectful, following the rules, just being considerate to everyone else. And what you guys decided to do was to take advantage, threaten to sue, so that you could try to get more than everyone else. And now, nobody likes you. I read... Yeah, after you guys threatened to sue, so that you could... That's why they got the 4 questions, because the commission... When did the CBC get 4 questions? Yes, after they had already folded to you, because you...
So he just admits he's wrong. Oh my goodness. What a peach. What a star. Ironworks MTG says for $2, would you rather super strength or speed? I would take super strength because I can just get a car and a car can get me around faster, but I don't have any, a forklift is harder to come by to use. So I'd rather have the strength. Zamir Morali says for $13.99, microwave your salad. I don't know what that means. Is that a reference to something I'm not getting? Microwave my salad. And Yellowhead Homestead says for $2, what's your favorite moment from the debate? I think the best moment was Poilievre's question to Mark Carney. It was really funny when Mark Carney got dunked on with his own question on the security clearance. Poilievre was still better because that was when Carney went full sourpuss. He's just sitting there like looking down, looking at his notes, not looking at Poilievre at all. That was the funniest part because it was just so clear. Because before he's kind of holding it together, he had just contempt on his face for even having to be asked anything. Yes, I'm mystified by their microwave salad comment. Is he still around to explain the microwave salad comment? Because I'm confused. Yeah, Peeper Jean says he sounds drunk, also sounds like he's on the verge of tears at times, unhinged a bit. Absolutely, because he thinks he's better than these people, and he can't believe that Rebel News and True North Wire Service and Juno News and all these other, but Western Standard gets to show up. They are disgusted by it thoroughly that independent media actually got to show up. Yeah. But that guy was, I don't know what his name is, but he's from the Hill Times. In fact, actually the hotel I'm at is near the Hill Times. I should go visit them tomorrow. That would be funny. That'd be really, really funny. Yeah, that guy's mustache is the cheesiest mustache I've ever seen on the planet. I promise you guys, I will not grow a mustache on this channel unless I do, in which this is me just joking, in case I do it one day. But I will not grow a mustache because never be the baby-faced guy with the giant caterpillar mustache. It's so cheesy. It is Parmesan cheese. It is cheddar cheese just melted over like old WWE wrestling tapes from the 80s. That is how cheesy it is. Anyways, so that should be it for today, guys. It is now 3.5 hours into the stream. Thank you for hanging out, watching the debate with me. Hopefully you didn't mind my pontificating during it. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. Ian Akut says, what about a playoff beard? No, because if I start trying to grow a beard and a mustache, and it sometimes happens a little bit if I haven't shaved when I'm traveling for a few days, I start to look like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. Zamir Morali says, microwave your salad was suggested by ChatGPT. I just wanted to donate to your great channel. Well, don't listen to ChatGPT. The AIs are trying to kill you. But yeah, so that should be it for me today, other than Colin Van Delden says, for $20, liberals seem to be gaining support either in areas where they have a stronghold or places they didn't have a chance. Like my riding of Elmwood Transcona went from 5 to 15%. Neither was more seats for the liberals. Absolutely, that's been the point I've been trying to make in a succinct way over the past couple of days, which you have put quite succinctly. Liberal gains, and this is why the Conservatives could potentially win a minority government with losing the popular vote. Because so much of the liberal gains are in areas where they don't need it. It's in areas that, again, like in Montreal, they were already going to win it anyways. In University Rosedale, they were already going to win it anyways. Or they're gaining a bunch of votes in Saskatchewan or in rural Alberta. And they might pick up seats in places like in Calgary. But that's offset by all the conservative gains in working class neighborhoods. $10 from King of Common Law says, I am just an old biker boomer. Respect, young man. I watch you regularly. Well, thank you for watching me regularly. I enjoy the regulars, always making sure the video gets to like several thousand views before an hour because people are waiting on pins and needles, apparently, to hear me ramble about stuff. CGR 902 says, Wyatt.exe has experienced an error and will now shut down. Yes, I must now go rest from all my rambling, although I will still probably ramble at whoever's available in real life. Anyway, so that should be it for me today, guys. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, do all that great stuff. You know, the normal thing I usually say at the end of videos. And I'll see you guys tomorrow with my official debate recap.